Hello all and welcome to this week's edition of SchuBro's Unfiltered. You've got Ross here, followed by my brother Kyle.
Howdy y'all, how y'all doing tonight? It's Kyle from Bryan College Station.
We're here to bring you your weekly dose of everything sports, politics, and anything that comes to our mind in between, plus a little brother-on-brother rivalries. So let's get going this week, Kyle. Get into our game of the week.
So we'll go game of the week. This week, had to do a little searching because we're kind of out of football for a week or so, due to the fact that the NFC and AFC championships are finished and college football's over. Sad day. So we had to go look at college basketball for relevant games. And with that said, I took a look for top 25 matchups that intrigued me. And to be honest, there wasn't many top 25 matchups at all this week. The only one that I found that really kind of caught my attention was Kentucky versus Texas Tech as part of the Big 12 SEC Challenge. Now, Kentucky's won 4 of the last 5, and Tech is only 3 out of the last 5, with 1 out of the last 3. But they're at home, where they're 9-1 and favored to win. You have Chris Beard, the young up-and-coming coach who's on fire right now. Everyone wants him, but he's a Tech alumni or a Texas alumni, one of the two. But he's a Texas man. He's a Texas boy, so he wants to stay at home in Texas. And then you have Kentucky with John Calipari, who's famous for being the coaches of the one and dones. Get them to come in, play awesome that 1 year, and then let them go off to the NBA and have their fortunes. So he recruits that very high level talent player. And then Chris Beard, he has a couple one and dones, but for the most part, he's got those 4-year players who come into his system and play, consistent for him and do well there. And both teams have been, and both teams have made recent runs in the last couple, big dances. So, it's going to be an interesting matchup. I tried to find a number on the line, like a line, and I searched a couple different places I know to look at, but because both teams play in between this game and that one, I couldn't find a line. Now I'm sure you'll find one in Googling it right now, but I couldn't this morning when I was doing research for the show. But at the time, it does still look intriguing as a game for this weekend. What do you think?
No, it definitely sounds like a good game. And, I said it many, many times, but college basketball, man, it sure is weird this year. We saw Duke lose another game to Clemson. We've seen several games that have just been, weirdly contested and the outcome not what you would expect. So college basketball for me this year is a toss-up. And maybe this is a little bit of shakeup from the recruiting scandal that we just saw in college basketball, but it's definitely a year where it feels like going into the tournament, it's anybody's game, and it should make the tournament very, very fun to watch.
Yeah, we have my throwback to a few weeks ago when I called UNC versus Gonzaga as the game of the week, and UNC just imploded, and they haven't been doing very well since. They're like sub 500. I don't know if I've ever seen UNC be sub 500 in the history of my remembrance. So ever since Roy Williams has been there, they've been that traditional blue blood, and this year they don't look anything like it. So it's definitely a weird year. You've got Kansas losing you've at home, which hardly ever happens, and that happened against Baylor. Then you have Baylor turn around and stub their toe at home themselves. It's been a crazy year in the basketball realm, and just no one knows what's going to happen. A&M comes out, beats Vanderbilt at their house, whoops them, then plays LSU very tight, very close, takes them to overtime, and just unfortunately can't edge them out in overtime. And then go play South Carolina Saturday, take the lead at the 12-minute mark, and then just get shellacked out of off the court from there on. Now, Coach Buzz has got his team buying in, but he needs to keep winning to keep his players, focused and bought in. Right now, they're playing hard for him, but if they can't get over that hurdle of winning a few games, you might see that intensity level kind of dwindle a little bit as they kind of realize, that this isn't going where we want it to. Or, Buzz might have them so good that he keeps them high intensity throughout, even though they're not winning. I hope to see that happen, and that's been his history in the past. But each team is its own individual entity, and you never know what's going to happen. So I hope that they can keep winning some more games and keep that intensity level high. I know the crowd's starting to buy in. They're not record crowds or anything of that nature, but A&M basketball, ever since Billy Clyde Gillespie left and Mark Turgeon for a little bit, but not through his entire tenure, has been kind of poor attendance. Doesn't have the best of attendance level. Don't know why. Just A&M struggles to draw a crowd for basketball. Kind of that history of being mediocre. But when we're playing good, the fans buy in, and you have a good, faithful home base, but you don't have that, excitement level under Turgeon. You didn't have it under Billy Kennedy, but people are buying in under Buzz. They like his antics. They like his sideline demeanor. They like the way he coaches, how hard his team plays for him. So there you do see people buying in and attending the games. The other night was a midday Saturday game, and I think they said somewhere in the 7,000 range, which is pretty good for A&M basketball. Not great, but pretty good. So hopefully the crowd keeps coming and keeps cheering these guys on, and we'll see what they can do.
All right. So moving out of that, let's get into our dim of the week. And this week it's fairly easy to pick somebody. I mean, don't get me wrong. With all the impeachment stuff, with Adam Schiff walking across the corridor there to the Senate and, looking like true stormtroopers walking across the Capitol. But our dim of the week is easily this week going to be Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, who made accusations that Bernie Sanders at one point in time in private, again, making an accusation that he's unable to defend himself for because there's no witnesses to the fact. So she's not able to prove it. He's not able to disprove it. But we see where the Me Too movement, where all of these movements have gone to where, women are to be believed. And so Elizabeth Warren comes out and she accuses Bernie Sanders of telling her a year ago in private that a woman could never be president. Now, Bernie, of course, defended himself and said what he was saying is that Donald Trump will stoop to no lows when it comes to, beating off a woman running for president. And that he thinks that it would make it easier time for Donald Trump to attack a woman. Now, of course, we saw Donald Trump run against a woman in the last election cycle. So this led to Twitter having a meltdown over Refund Warren, where there's a literal prediction that Warren may have lost more money this quarter due to the refunds that were requested from her on Act Blue, which she must give, and that she could have actually lost more money than she's going to take in. Now, she had a good moment at the debate, but that's only because CNN blatantly took her side and ensured that her narrative was pushed in terms of pushing this forward. So we even see but where it gets bad for her is we saw a video from after debate was over where she confronts Sanders like a petulant child and accuses him of accusing her of lying on national TV. Bernie then turns and says, "We will discuss this at another time. And then he gets upset for a second, but then he refrains himself and says, you know what? We're going to discuss this later in private where we can handle it and where we can deal with it privately." Bernie has been a very staunch supporter of Elizabeth Warren through her history. And all of a sudden, because she's not seeing any separation between her and Sanders, she felt the need to attack him and to make him seem like a misogynist. Now, we're starting to see these cracks on the left side, and it's going to be very interesting moving forward to see what comes of all of these things. But for this week, Elizabeth Warren, I'm going to hand you our dim of the week.
Yeah, I saw the hot mic episode, and the memes coming out of that were pretty much on point. You have, her going up like, I take back everything nice I've ever said about you. And then Bernie says, you mean you're an Indian giver? So I laughed at that one. Gave me a good little chuckle just like it did you just then. It's been very interesting watching what's like. That was the only interesting moment of the debate from most people's perspective. You had this hour and a half, 2 hour event, and the only thing that anybody cares about or paid attention to is that 30-second clip after the debate was over. So Dems are, it's kind of interesting. They're doing all this, trying to get their names out there, and the only thing that anyone really gives a flying patootie about is that 30-second encounter after the event was over. Once she goes to confront him, everyone kind of gets a good little laugh at it, good little memes come out of it. So
yeah,
I just don't see. And what was it? Van Jones, the most liberal of all liberal announcers or commentators, comes out and says, "I don't see anyone out of this group beating Donald Trump."
So, if you're watching the Dem debates for actual policy, you're watching the wrong show, because you're not going to get actual policy, anything that's reasonable outside of that in that debate.
You're very much correct.
So moving forward, okay, so we're talking about Dems, we're talking about the Dem debates. Of course, a big topic of the Dem debates was the impeachment trial. So we have the impeachment trial.
Let's take a quick little break before we jump into that. Let's address some things going on in the show. So you and I had gone back and forth over when to record this show. And we originally came up with Sundays as the best time. And I thought the evenings worked best, and you thought mid-afternoon worked best. And we just kind of kept getting on each other's nerves, going back and forth over where should we have this show. So programming alert, moving forward, we're going to move this to Monday nights. I was unaware of some of Ross's obligations on Sunday evenings, and he wasn't aware of my obligation Sunday midday. So we kind of been back and forth over what time Sunday to do it, but we both came to the realization that Monday evenings work best for both of us. So we are going to start doing the show starting Monday evenings, and we'll fit guests in as needed or when we can, whenever the best availability for our guests comes up. So with that said, now we can move on to impeachment, because that's irrelevant news, and let's get it out of the way with the intro, and let's go on to relevant news with the impeachment.
All right. So listeners, you may have to wait an extra day to get your weekly update of Schumann Brothers Unfiltered. But between Kyle, myself, and our gracious editor Luke, we're our goal is not to give you a show every week. Our goal is to give you good, great content that you want to listen to. And that's our ultimate motive, is to give you something that you want to come back week and week and week after and keep listening to, because you feel that it's something that enriches your life. So any decisions we make are always in the effort to make our recording, our information more up to date and better, so that you have a better listening experience when you listen to our show. So we're going to get into the impeachment. So, okay, as I said, the Dems have, absolutely been talking about impeachment. That's all they want to talk about. So, of course, we now have the articles of impeachment have finally officially passed the House and are on their way to the Senate, with tomorrow being the day where the Senate will actually start setting some rules for the Senate trial. We've seen a varying level of what's going to happen here. We've seen everything from this could be dismissed outright immediately, to this could last 6 weeks, to we're going to call every witness we possibly can. So there's definitely, some uncertainty here on how this is going to affect the Senate schedule. Kyle, what do you think is coming up? What are we in store for tomorrow? And then what are we in store for through the rest of the week?
So tomorrow you're going to see, the presentation of the impeachment articles to the Senate, that, you know, the official from the Senate level, and you're going to see them start deliberating on it. Now, you've seen Mitch McConnell come out and say, if the Democrats try to make this into a clown show, he's just going to pull the plug and it's going to be over. They're just going to dismiss it outright. So I don't think you'll see that happen. Originally, I bet you would have, but with Mitch being as staunch as he has, surprisingly staunch as he has on this, you're going to see them kind of rein it back in. I don't know if you're going to see any witnesses called or not, because when Clinton was impeached, they brought up the potential of bringing up witnesses, but then the Democrats at that time went on record and saying that would just make a spectacle of it, and that wasn't their role. It was just to have a trial. But in my mind, if you're having a trial, you should be calling witnesses. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on that? I'm kind of stuck. I don't really know where to lean on that, because the Democrats want it done, the Republicans don't. But in a fair trial, witnesses do come forth. So kind of at an impasse there.
Well, where the road really meets, where the rubber meets the road here is, who are we calling as witnesses? Because the issue is that the House had every opportunity to call witnesses, and they decided that they weren't going to wait for the courts to decide whether or not they could call any people of the executive branch as witnesses.
Yeah, because Trump blocked it, didn't he?
Trump blocked it under executive privilege. So there was a court case to decide whether or not Trump had executive privilege in this case, and in whether he could exert executive privilege to block members of his team from testifying or being compelled by a subpoena. So we could have had a court case decide this. We could have had the third arm, the separate but equal third arm of the government, the judiciary, come in and make a ruling and set us straight constitutionally on what is and is not here and what is and is not acceptable. But the Dems, Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, Jared Nadler, decided that they didn't want to wait, that they needed to get this done so quickly that it wasn't worth their time. So what they did is they attached a second article for obstruction of Congress. Now, so there's the argument to be made that if they wanted to have called witnesses, they needed to have called them in the House. And there is a line inside of impeachment that says it's not the Senate's job to reinvestigate the crime or the supposed crime, the alleged crime, but it's their job to decide on the facts brought forth by the House. So what you're saying is that the House is the actual jury. The actual
House
jury
is trial.
The investigator. The House is the detectives.
The jury trial, and then the Senate is more the sentencing.
So no. So think of it this way: when you have a court case, it's detectives go out and they look for evidence and they try to find things. They find witnesses. They try to find things that match their case. They then present that case to a grand jury. So the select committee, the intelligence committee, and the ethics committee, or whatever Jerry Nadler's over, I can't think of the name of it right now, but whatever committees they're over, they're the detectives. They went out and they investigated an alleged crime, and they came up with evidence, and then they
are looking for an indictment.
They put that evidence forward to the full House, which is then the grand jury, and that grand jury then votes on whether or not to impeach, which is to say indict. Now the Senate is the actual jury, and they're going to hear the evidence that was presented. Now, when you are going through a court trial, there's a thing called discovery, which is where the defense gets an opportunity to see all of the evidence being held against them. The prosecution does not necessarily get to see all of the defendant's possible evidence that could exonerate him. So typically what would happen in a court trial is, before the court can call a surprise witness, they would have to offer the defendant a chance at discovery against that witness, a chance to depose that witness in private and see what they know, see what they have to say. Now, that's if the person would choose to. Some defendants, they don't choose to do discovery. So in this case, typically the only surprise witnesses can be of the exonerating, can be on the defendant's type, can be the defendant presenting somebody who has exonerating evidence who we haven't heard from before. So now what the Dems are saying is, we want the Senate to call all of these witnesses we didn't call, John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, and anybody else that was on the executive side that they did not call. But they don't want to allow the Republicans. So they're trying to say it's about relevance. Well, relevance is in the eye of the beholder. So if I think it's relevant that Hunter Biden testify, then to me it's relevant. The Dems don't think it's relevant because their argument is that there was no wrongdoing by the Bidens in Ukraine. Therefore, there was no reason to call for an investigation of the Bidens in Ukraine other than to create a political football for Joe Biden, who is running for president. That's their argument. Now, of course, we've seen some evidence presented that shows contrary to that. And it would be, in my opinion, worthwhile to get Joe and Hunter Biden sat down under oath and force them to testify over their dealings in the Ukraine. Did Joe Biden know that Hunter was doing this? Was he aware what was going on? Did he specifically have Ukraine fire a prosecutor in order to aid his son and the company his son was working for? And if this is the case, then we definitely see that Trump's desire to have an investigation opened is valid. But the Dems, of course, are going to say relevance, relevance, relevance. So I don't think we should hear from any new witnesses. I don't think we should hear from Hunter or Joe Biden. I don't think we should hear from John Bolton or Mick Mulvaney. At this point, the Dems have made their case with the evidence they have. And if they want to add new evidence, then they need to take it back to the House and they need to attempt to recycle more witnesses and allow for maybe another article of impeachment. And that may come later on. We may see them author another article of impeachment later on. Now, of course, that would be a political nightmare for them should Trump be acquitted in the Senate, and would be a complete waste of time because they know the Senate at that point would just acquit the charges. So I'm of this day. If they want to bring in any of the current witnesses, any of the witnesses that testified before the House, whether in public or private, because we have some witnesses that testified in private that never testified in public. Why were those witnesses not allowed to testify? We heard the Republicans constantly say during the public testimony that only the witnesses who had statements that were good or agreeing with the Democrats' assessment were allowed to publicly testify, to publicly shape the public narrative. But there are some people who testified privately who were very exonerating to the president. So that'll be the interesting part. The Senate, in my view, should call those witnesses because those are already part of the evidence we've seen. They should not call any new witnesses because the only thing that's going to happen if you call Hunter and Joe Biden, the left is going to claim, they're going to have a nit fit over it, and the right's going to have a nit fit over calling John Bolton or Mick Mulvaney. So to me, let's stick with the witnesses we have. That's why you voted for impeachment. You said that was enough. So make your case with what you have.
Makes sense. So yeah, that's a good explanation because I've heard different ways of how it relates to a typical jury or a typical jury setting or a typical typical
Judicial.
Setting in a courtroom setting. There we go. Blah.
There you go.
All right, cool. Finally got some words out. So yeah, so that's a good overview of at least our understanding of how the impeachment method goes. So I appreciate that. Helps me a little bit as well. So one thing I did notice was how, somber and ceremonial the impeachment articles were brought over, and how, fancy of a pen was used to sign said impeachment articles by Nancy Pelosi. Did you see did you hear about the snafu that happened with those pens?
So I didn't hear about a snafu. I know they were taxpayer funded pens. So that they were
misprinted.
Uh-oh.
They had to be printed a second time because they had a typo the first time. So they had to completely redo them twice.
So we paid twice for that, because if anybody's ever had something printed, print shops print what you give them. Exactly what they give. They will not fix a typo because they do not know that you do not intend that typo. So if you proof something and you say it's good and you send it to a printer and they print it, you pay for it. It's yours. So if they had to have them reprinted, that means we paid for those pens twice. So that means every one of you Americans who's going to go on April 15th and write a check to the federal government, part of that check, maybe a small itty bitty little minute portion, but even still, if it's 1 penny per person, went to pay for Nancy Pelosi's pens so that she could sign that piece of paper with literally making the littlest part of her name and her signature with each individual pen. Yeah,
that was very somber. No smiles, no nothing, no giggling, no happy faces. He's not impeached forever. Oh wait, I'm being facetious. That all happened. They were giggling, they were smiling, they were bragging about having him impeached forever. He will always be impeached. And then you had Ted Cruz fire back today saying, and he will be acquitted forever as well.
Well, and that's exactly right? I mean, people have been indicted for all kinds of things and been found not guilty. The only thing that truly matters is that they were found not guilty. So, nobody cares that they were indicted. The only thing anybody cares about is that they were found not guilty of the crime.
So Trump is the 3rd president overall, or the 4th president ever to be impeached?
So he's the 4th president to be impeached. Correction. Because it was Johnson, Nixon, Clinton, Trump. Andrew Johnson.
Okay. Way back when.
Way back.
But nobody has officially been removed ever. But you did have Nixon voluntarily step down. Yeah, resigned.
Nixon resigned. So nobody's ever been removed, showing you that impeachment, although a vital tool in the quiver of Congress, unless they hold both chambers, and due to the strict, majority that needs to, it's not a simple majority needed to convict in the Senate. It is a supermajority, 66%. So they would need 15, almost 20 Republican senators to jump ship and vote to convict. And without that, it's an acquittal. So, I mean, in a real trial, if this was in a court of law, it would be a unanimous decision amongst the jurors. If one person disagreed, then he would be found not guilty, or it'd be a hung jury. But, in the Senate, we only need, because it's not a criminal conviction, we only need 66%. But still, this is why I argue when anybody says we need a constitutional amendment. Who in your right mind thinks we're getting a constitutional amendment through this Congress today? There's never going to be another constitutional amendment as long as we live, because there will never be a supermajority in Congress.
Well, Ross, you can't say never or always. Statistics says that the second you do that, you're going to be proven wrong. So while it's very unlikely that it'll ever happen in our lifetimes, it's not impossible.
I did hedge saying in our lifetime, but I will eat a hat. Take this hat, the Syracuse black hat, and boil it for an hour and eat the sucker if we get a constitutional amendment passed. Not just passed, not just through a select committee, but fully ratified into the Constitution. It's not going to happen. I don't see us ever having enough bipartisanship to get another constitutional amendment through Congress. And I'm just going to stake my reputation, whatever you want to call it, on that fact. Now, did you also see Nancy Pelosi go on Bill Maher?
I did not. I saw that it happened, but I didn't really even get a synopsis of what happened. I know she was like laughing and giggling, and saying impeach forever. Yeah, that's her new saying.
Bill Maher came out and he thanked Nancy Pelosi for waiting until he was back on the air to start the impeachment trial. Because basically, from the day he got impeached to today, most big radio shows, most big news shows were on Christmas hiatus, end of the year hiatus. So they wouldn't have been able to cover it. But since Nancy Pelosi waited, Bill Maher thanked her so that he got to cover it. And then gave her a big fist bump. Now, somber, right? Somber and just sad and somber. We need to just, we're reflective of this moment. We didn't want to do it. You don't really fist bump over things you didn't want to have to do.
Wasn't there Democratic Congress people running on the fact that they were going to impeach Trump? Like, wasn't that a campaign item for a lot of Democrats?
Rashida Tlaib, ran on the entire platform of I'm going to Congress to impeach Donald Trump. And, in her acceptance speech said, now let's go impeach the MFer. So, the New York Times wrote an article 15 minutes after the inauguration calling for the case for impeachment. So they've wanted to impeach him since the moment he stepped foot in the White House. But, again, they don't control the Senate. So this is really a ballyhoo and a farce. So I do want to talk about one thing that Mitch McConnell did right before, because once they start the impeachment trial, that's it. That's all the Senate can do. That's all they can work on is the trial. So Mitch McConnell very adeptly pulled a good move right before they went into the trial, which is calling the USMCA for a vote.
Yeah, that was a landmark there. That's very helpful for the Marines. The American citizens, the Canadian citizens, and the Mexican citizens.
So China has already ratified it. Now, Canada has yet to ratify it, but they said publicly they were waiting on us to do so. They didn't want to take the time to ratify it if we weren't able to get it done. So, now they have said that they're fully on board with it and that they will jump on.
Did you mean Mexico before or not China?
If I said China, I meant Mexico. So
okay, just making sure, because there's another deal with China that also happened in and around this same time.
So we had phase 1 get signed with China, which is another. Now, there's people that are saying, well, China's not going to adhere to it. They're just going to renege on it. Okay, that would be true of any agreement. They could sign that they're going to pay 100% of our stuff and we're never going to pay them anything. They still can renege on it. That's true of any individual trade deal. Any individual trade deal can be reneged upon. That's why you have enforcement measures. That's why there's other things that are put into there. So we could talk about that, but it's really a minute point, because we could talk about that in terms of TPP when it was being proposed. We could talk about it in terms of NAFTA. We could talk about it in terms of any single trade deal. It's an agreement between two parties. It's a contract. Contracts, people renege on contracts all the time. So saying, "Oh, well, China's not going to follow," not going to follow it is a moot point, because they could do that with any other deal. So I wanted to ask you, now, the last time we brought up USMCA, you had a fairly funny soundbite. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity here to redeem yourself when it comes to this legislation. And I want to get from you, I'm hoping you've done some research.
A wee bit.
What do you like about the USMCA other than their snazzy blue uniforms?
I already made fun of myself, man. You missed the opportunity. I took it away from you. I said the Marines. Oh wait, I meant Mexico, Canada, and China. not China, like you said, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S.
You still fucked it up.
I messed it up just like you did. But you messed it up worse than I did. All right, so the best part that I could, based on my limited research this morning in between many phone calls, was the dairy farmers are regaining access to the Canadian markets and Class 7 products such as milk powder and milk proteins, and it limits how much Canadian dairy farmers can export, which allows the American dairy farmers to capitalize on the foreign markets. So that's going to help quite a bit. And then you have the BAMF of this all, correct me if I pronounce this incorrectly, Robert Lighthizer, who's the trade representative. Lightsinger. That does not look like Lightsinger whatsoever. There's no even inger in that word. It's Lighthizer. How does that Lightsinger?
Lightenzer. I'm sorry.
I was about to say
something like that.
Yeah,
I know the Z is
this
pronounced.
Gentleman is the same gentleman who led the Chorus agreement, which is the U.S.-South Korea trade deal, and that's been very beneficial for us as well. So this gentleman is now, at the forefront of not only Chorus, but USMCA. And because of that, we now have the ability to focus all of our efforts on the deal with China. And you saw, the day after the USMCA got passed, the China Phase 1 deal came down. And because Trump now had, all of his time to, focus on the China deal, only took him 24 hours.
Well, and that's exactly it. I mean, now that we have a stronger connection with Mexico and Canada.
Not China?
Not China. Which we do have a stronger connection with China today than we did a month ago, thanks to Phase 1. But thanks to this stronger connection, we had more negotiating power when it came to negotiating our deal with China. And China had to make some concessions because we have this strong connection. We have trade partners that are not China, that we have a very strong, brand new pact with. Now, there's people who don't like the USMCA, and there's people, there's people who really want to see it change in certain facets. So one of the big things we saw right at, the 100-yard line, the 99-yard line, Democrats imposed a addition of worker protections.
That was actually in my worst portions of the bill.
Yeah, exactly. And so what that's going to do is it's going to force us to have more unionized labor. It's going to force Mexico to have more unionized labor. Now, I don't know that that's, such a bad thing in Mexico. Maybe it's good for Mexican workers because, they don't have the technological advances in their workplaces as we do. But I'm not a big union supporter, so
same here.
When I see adding more unions or more people in unions, making more jobs unionized, that kind of makes a sour taste in my mouth. Now, I approve of the overall deal. I think, there's trade-offs to everything. And I think that the overall deal is solid. It opens up markets. It's going to get more auto manufacturing done inside the United States, which is always good. Now, those are unionized jobs, but screw it. It's still American workers getting money. Whether they're unionized workers or not, it's still American workers that are getting jobs. So for a long time.
So the thing I saw on this is that it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's labor unions that are getting the work, but it does say that 30%, and it'll be going to 40% in 2023 of cars have to be made by workers earning at least $16 an hour. So it's kind of setting a minimum wage for auto workers in the U.S. and China. Damn it, Ross. U.S. and Canada, not China. The U.S. and Canada have to be making at least $16 an hour, and Mexico as well. Don't quote me on that one. I don't know if that number is accurate for Mexico. I know it's accurate for America and it's accurate for Canada. I can't remember what it said in regarding to Mexico. But you have states like Texas that do have quite a bit of factories down in the San Antonio region for Toyota. And those workers from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but those workers are not unionized because Texas is a right to work state, meaning that at any time I can come into work and say, screw it, I'm done. Give my 2 weeks and be gone. And at the same time, my employer can say, you smell today, you're done. Go home, you're fired. So
well, I mean,
there's no real protection.
You don't even need to give your 2 weeks. You could literally walk out, first thing in the morning, get there, flip the double bird. Now, chances of getting rehired, chances of getting a good reference, slim to none. But you could do it if you wanted to.
Yeah, especially if you have like another job lined up and you never plan on going, like it's like you're changing industries or something of that nature. Like when I was working in IT and then got into the IT field, that was, or not when I was working in IT and got into the project management field, it was an extension of IT, but it wasn't IT any longer. So it was allowed me to kind of say, screw you, I done, and walk out and go take this new job, a little bit higher paying. But it wasn't necessarily about the pay per se. It was about the ability to take on a new challenge and grow myself as a person and individual.
No, and I mean, I think, once again, I think the USMCA as a whole is a good piece of legislation. It's a good trade agreement. The argument is that it's not a true free trade agreement because it does have some protectionism measures. Listen, we've seen free trade there's no such thing as true free trade because every country, regardless of who they are, whether they're the United States, whether they're China, whether they're Canada, Mexico, Peru, Germany, Britain, France, whoever you want to say, they attach certain measures to whatever they're doing, whatever goods that they're good at. And everybody is protective of certain industries in their home country. So there is no true free trade. Free trade would mean that every country would specialize in a very few things that they are very, very good at, and that other countries would completely exit those markets, and that those markets would then become only in the specialized areas where they are cheapest and best performed, where the economies of scale are best, where the people are the best at performing them. So we would say, the United States gets oil production with Saudi Arabia, Sweden gets to make watches and chocolate, Germany gets to make chocolate and cars, and these other countries that don't have anything that they are particularly specialized in, countries that are resource poor, countries that don't have a particularly skilled labor force, countries that don't, have the infrastructure in place to do some of these major things, they get left in the cold. They don't have a market here other than being pawns to everybody else's markets. So free trade is great in theory. It's great when you sit down on a piece of paper and you talk about it in theory, but in reality, it's not what it's been sold to be. We're seeing economists now come out and say, look, even economists on the left who have said free trade is not as good as what we thought it could be. And until of course, the people on the left, they just want to say, okay, everybody sings Kumbaya, everybody holds their hands, and everybody gets along, and we live in this, worldwide utopia of policy where everybody gets everything they want. And of course, their answer to that is socialism. The government takes over all resources, and then each government gets to decide how to distribute said resources in the most efficient manner. Okay. But the problem is governments do not divide resources in an efficient manner. They never have, they never will. The one unifying characteristic of humans is that we are selfish by nature, regardless of whether you're a 1 month old or you're a 99-year-old, that you have a selfish tendency for self-preservation, self-enhancement. Capitalism takes that and it's a driving factor in capitalism, that you get to be selfish, but the only way for you truly be selfish is to also involve other people. So you don't get to be a billionaire unless you're hiring other people and they're working for you and also making money. Therefore, they are enriched as well. Maybe not as much as you are, but they are enriched as well. And of course, I'm not calling for anarchy in any means, because every system needs a set of rules and laws to govern it. Otherwise, it's just bedlam. Otherwise, it's just everybody shooting everybody. The guy with the biggest pistol wins. Like it was in, the California gold rush. Hey, if you don't like what I'm doing, I'll just shoot you and I'll take your gold and nobody will know because we're out here in the middle of bumfuck and you're never going to be found. So there definitely has to be rules and regulations, but, at the same time, the regulations don't need to be so expansive that they prevent growth.
Speaking of regulations and something that literally just happened to me, have you seen all these issues coming up with Amazon and Google and Facebook listening to you?
So yes, I've heard of this, and I have 2 Amazon Echoes in my house. One, the Dot, has had a proclivity to because it's in my kids' toy room for them to listen to music while they're playing, and I haven't witnessed it firsthand, but I've been told a woman will just start talking to my kids while they're in the room. I don't know. It may be the news app. It may be playing the news, but they have said that some woman is actively talking to them while they were in the room.
Interesting. Well, the reason I asked was because of advertising. How we, the consumer, are now actually the product. Because everything is free, like Facebook and Twitter and all these different apps, that we, the consumer, have become the product. Well, as we're sitting here talking, me on my blue microphone with my stand and my background acoustic panels, I get an email from Amazon asking me about my opinion on my Knox Gear shock mount as well as the panels. So I'm literally just sitting here in front of my recording area, talking to you about stuff, and I'm getting not an advertisement, but hey, how are these things doing for you as I'm sitting here in front of them? I got the email at 10:04. It's 10:06 right now. Kind of creepy. So somewhere in my house, Amazon is listening and asking me to go ahead and finally give them a rating on how good I think this product is. Hey, Amazon, I really enjoy this system I have set up. I did a decent amount of research on it and very much appreciating not having to hold the microphone in front of my face anymore. The sound panels are working great because I don't have that echo effect any longer. And the system, for the snowball, the windscreen, definitely helping my breathing. You do still hear it occasionally, but you're not hearing me breathe nearly as much as I used to. So Amazon, thanks for listening. Hopefully we can get some more listeners as good as Amazon.
There you go. So, I have this argument all the time with the Yang Gang group. So a big part of what Andrew Yang is saying is that, okay, as you said, the consumer is also now the product, and that these companies are profiting off of our data, and therefore we should get a check every month that is derived from the profits of that data. Now, of course, he wouldn't just be taxing the data companies, the tech companies, he'd be taxing everybody. But here's a simple solution. If you don't like Amazon, Facebook, Google having your data, don't give it to them. It's really that simple. Okay, I don't really care for social media. I have a Twitter now, but because I enjoy Twitter. I enjoy getting on Twitter. I enjoy arguing with people. I actually find it fun to argue with people, especially people who don't agree with me. If I'm able to have a legitimate debate, great. But I like trolling people when they get mad at me. So, because I don't care. I'm never going to see these people in real life. I'm never going to meet them. Their opinions are literally, I don't care about them. So, it's easy, it's like going out in public, right? When all my buddies in high school would say, oh, I can't go up to that girl and ask her out because what if she says no? It's like, you're never going to see her again, dude. I mean, what does it matter? If she says no, you'll literally never see her again. Just go ask her out if you want to ask her out. Because, I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? She says no, you walk away, you never see her again in your life, or even if you do see her, you two won't remember each other. So go take your shot, dude.
Yeah, it costs you nothing to shoot your shot.
That's right. Twitter is not real life, man. Dave Rubin says it all the time. Twitter is not real life. Twitter is fear of people who think they know everything, myself included, who get on and talk crap to one another and don't use real words because it takes up too much space. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about with the USMCA was, how do you see this? So we just had the impeachment. So Trump is impeached forever, but now he's also gotten the USMCA through. How do you think this affects his overall legacy? And how do you think this affects going into 2020?
So that's kind of a two-parter. Now, if somehow, some way, which I don't see happening, but if Trump is somehow, some way removed from office, it's, even though he's gotten a lot of good things done, the legacy will be that he was the first ever president removed from office, unless he resigns, in which case he'll be the second president to have resigned during their tenure. I don't see that happening. I could be wrong. I've been known to happen before. Ask my wife; she'll tell you I'm wrong all the time. But just based on what currently is sitting in the Senate, as far as where the power lies, it's not going to happen. Again, never speak in absolutes, because that's when you're absolutely going to be proven wrong. With that said, I think we have a good merchandising opportunity here. We should be printing hats that say, "This is the hat Ross will eat." And go ahead and get like 500 of those printed, and you have to eat every single one of them. And then, maybe one with Kyle's hat to eat based on this statement right here. But with the USMCA, China Phase 1, and chorus going through, you're going to, more than likely, what the legacy of Trump is going to be, at least for his first term, providing that he doesn't get a second, but let's just go for first term today. If his legacy is going to be that of someone who came in as a businessman and got America back to doing business again. Maybe not as effectively as he could have, kind of being hamstrung by the fact that, the House did get flipped over to the Democratic Party, but still a president who, even without true consolidated power, was still able to revitalize American business. You have the Dow at an all-time high. You have not one, not two, but 3 major trade deals going into effect. You have, Iran backing down. You have China, kind of having to back down on Hong Kong and Taiwan. You're seeing America strengthened again and becoming a power player once again, like it should and could and always has and should be. We did take a step back under the last administration. We went on the great apology tour, apologized to all these countries and how, we've, offended them over the years, and took major steps back from being a powerhouse, because, we don't want to be the colonialists anymore. But Trump is saying, screw y'all. America is my country. I want America to be great. And I'm going to do anything and everything I can to make America the best possible country for me and my children and your children and everyone's children moving forward. If, we want to be that beacon in the night again, we want to be the country that everyone wants to come to because everything is going so well here. Yes, we may have racial unrest. Yes, we may have, sexism. Yes, we may have all these other things that do give us a blemish, but we're still the best possibility for anyone who's looking to escape their current lives and start over and make, an actual dream for themselves come true. That used to be the motto, give me your hurdle masses. And everyone was coming here because even though we had all these blemishes, we were still much better than any other option out there.
So for me, I personally, I think and I'm speaking in terms of right now. I don't know what's going to happen in his second term. I don't know, what'll come of his second term if he gets one, like you said. I'm to the belief that he gets a second term. That doesn't mean I'm not going to go vote, but I'm definitely on the belief that he gets a second term. But, in my opinion, in what I've seen, what I've read, what I've heard, Trump has done a lot of really good things. So, a couple big ones is he strengthened NATO. So early on in his term, he was very hard on NATO to the point where everybody said, oh, he's going to break up NATO and he's going to destroy NATO. Except the exact opposite has actually happened. NATO today, because the Germans, the French, the British, and several other countries have committed to far more spending on defense due to Trump being hard-nosed with them, has strengthened NATO, has put NATO in a better position to better be able to fight off a Russian war if necessary. So, this is strengthening the countries that are, at risk of a Russian invasion and putting them in a better place to be deterrents and giving them more backing from the countries that are not only United States, but also the other major countries in their area, that there's more firepower, more soldiers, more ability to go and fight off a Russian invasion. So, we've seen lately, there was an article written that said if the United States and Russia were to go to war right now, Russia wins. But this completely neglects the NATO alliance. This completely neglects any of our NATO allies jumping into the fight to help us. So their big thing is, U.S. is only going to be able to send a select amount of troops into Russia, and Russia can attack us on our home turf. Russia and China are probably the only two countries that can attack us on our home turf. But again, this is completely denying the existence of NATO, which is stronger today. So President Trump has done, what many thought was a brash move to begin with, but has actually turned into, something that has led to NATO becoming a much, much stronger entity today than it was when he entered office. And don't get me wrong, the French and the Germans didn't go into this willingly. We took them kicking and screaming, but we got them to do it. So that's a win. So, a few other things he's done is a story I just sent you right before the show aired that was posted on Daily Wire. The Mexico Protection Protocols. This is widely revamped the way illegal immigration exists within this country. And we've seen in Arizona a 90% drop in illegal border crossings year to date. From last year this time to this year this time. So last year this time, there were 14,000 somewhat illegal border crossings in Arizona. This last month, December of 2019 versus December of 2018, there was 800 illegal border crossings. And when asked, the migrants have completely told us that it is 100% entitled to MPP being put forth. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I was looking at the article real quick. Repeat the question.
So MPP, so the story from Daily Wire showing that the Mexico Protection Protocols, where asylum seekers must wait in Mexico and are allowed to come into the United States, not allowed to stay here for the 2 to 3 years until their cases are heard. They actually have to stay in Mexico and continue there until it's time for their case to be heard. So, we've seen a 90% reduction in the amount of migrants crossing in Arizona, in the Yuma sector of Arizona, which used to be one of the major hotspots for migrant crossings. So what are your thoughts on the MPP protocols and also, on the drop of immigration totally, illegal immigration?
So it's been drastic how fast and how quick this is taking effect. This is one of the areas that Trump's border wall did go into effect, correct?
So, we're building border wall out there, but it's not complete.
Okay. But you do have segments where it has been built, and typically from what they've been saying is they find the areas where the crossings are the highest, and that's where they're putting up the protections as quickly as possible to help curb it. It's not going to stop it completely, but curb it. So, and then keeping them on the Mexican border or the Mexican side of the border while they're going through asylum instead of allowing them to come here and then just disappear into the night. So yes, 90%, like you said, 90% of people in a year lower than what it had been previously. And I'm sure that number was drastically lower than the year prior and even more drastically lower than the years under Obama. So with that said, you've gotten at least a start on controlling the border. You've got to start on, putting processes back into place to allow them to legally come here. Now, me and you are both of the opinion that when they come legally, that's fine. We don't mind people coming here the right way. If it wasn't for the people being allowed to come here the right way, our grandparents or great-grandparents wouldn't have ever made it here, and they'd still be, we'd still be German citizens because of that. But because there are, pathways to become an American citizen and pathways to become a legal immigrant, our great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents were able to come, and these people are going to be allowed to come as well. Now, maybe not as fast as they want to. Maybe they have to wait a while, go through the, the procedures and the protocols, but they are going to be able to come eventually. If they're that determined to be here, they'll make it. And those are the people that we want, the people that are determined to be here, the people that are determined to make a better life for themselves. So I'm glad to see that it's working.
Trump has done a few things here. So the MPP was put into place, and that has lowered the incentive for people to come illegally and get caught, file for asylum, and then disappear into the country for 2 to 3 years, waiting for their case to be heard. So that's driven the incentive way down. The other thing is working with Mexico. He's gotten Mexico to agree to further enhance their security on their southern border, plus adding some security to their northern border. So this is helping in terms of cartel violence. This is helping in terms of keeping migrants down. There's a lot of things there. So Trump not only passed the MPP on our side, he's not only gotten some money to start building the border wall, which, listen, to all the Republicans who are being impatient and they want the border wall done yesterday, at least we're moving forward with it. Government is not going to act quickly. So just, understand that this wasn't going to happen overnight regardless. And up until this point, it wasn't happening at all. So at least now it's somewhat moving forward.
And if
the other part of that,
and if you've ever been in construction, things get delayed, things have, time frames get moved out. That any project manager will tell you, you're always fighting scope, you're always fighting budget, and you're always fighting time. You get to pick 2 of those 3, and sometimes you only get to pick 1. So this is a magnitude scope. Right? This scope is gigantic. This is the entire border wall from, Pacific Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico. One of the biggest walls ever conceived, other than the Great Wall of China, which works wonderfully, by the way. So
it did when it was built.
Exactly. So, this is a major task. This is a major undertaking, and anything done by the government, as you and I are both well aware of, never goes quickly. There's always delays. There's always setbacks. There's always something that comes up, whether it be red tape, whether it be someone getting their feelings hurt because they weren't put in charge in the manner they thought they were going to be. So they're going to, dig their heels in and make sure things don't happen until they get their way. That's always going to be part of a project. So, the fact that we are, like you said, are making some progress, we are making little bite-sized increments, like you love to preach, incrementalism.
Incrementalism.
There we go. I said it mostly right. But yeah.
Almost counts in horseshoes and hand grenades.
Hey, I'm throwing hand grenades, buddy. So, as long as we're making some progress and making some movement, that's better than nothing. And that's what we had previously. So let's keep moving forward. Let's keep getting something done.
Well, and I think again, and incrementalism. I know it doesn't sound sexy. It doesn't sound like we're getting what we want, but we're not going to get what we want by trying to throw the Hail Mary every play. We're going to have to start chipping away. We're going to have to start taking our little pot shots here and there. We're going to have to start, chipping a few up on the green and making our putts. So it's not about, can we get everything today? Can we get everything tomorrow? It's about, okay, can I get a little bit closer? A little bit closer. It took 50 years for the left to get us to this point, from where they started in the 50s and 60s to where we are today. And it's going to take an equal or longer time to get us back to where we were before all of this occurred. So, since we went with the sports analogies, let's go ahead and transition to talking sports. So, of course, Monday night, we had a very major big game with a lot of implications moving forward. We had the college football national championship game. Clemson, LSU. So, we both thought LSU would win. So that's not really a surprise to us. LSU won. We weren't far away on calling the scores either. So, go ahead and tell us, what did you think of the game? What did you think of Joe Burrow? What did you think of Trevor Lawrence? And what do you see for both programs moving forward?
So, it was a great game. Clemson jumped out it early, made us believers that they had a chance to upset LSU, and then LSU does what it did all season and just roar back, come back from behind, and take a commanding lead and just never give it up. Like I said, LSU tied 7-7 in the first quarter, but Clemson then jumped out to a 17-7 lead, and it looked like they were about to start running away with it. And then all of a sudden, LSU flipped the script, scores 21 unanswered, and you're like, oh wow, okay, this is a game now. And you come out into the beginning of the second half. Clemson comes out and scores a touchdown and goes for 2 early on, kind of surprising, and makes it 25-28 at the time. And you were like, okay, Clemson's now, this is Clemson's, they're going to come back, they're going to roar, but this is their, they're going to start asserting dominance. I was like, nah, I don't think so. I think LSU is still going to take this. Now, LSU did win, but they didn't do it as like they did in the first half. They only scored another 2 touchdowns, and it was a comfortable win, 42-25. But I kind of was thinking at that point, they were going to kind of do what they did in the first half and just go off and start scoring in bunches. So credit to Clemson for holding them to only 14 points in the second half after having given up 28 in the first. But Joe Burrow just came alive and showed you why he's more than likely going to be the consensus number 1 overall pick and be another Bengal coming up here soon. So if they don't take him, they're idiots. So what do you think on that?
Well, I definitely think the Bengals can be idiots, but I don't think they're going to screw this one up. They've already said they're not going to trade out of number 1. They have no interest in trading the pick. They're all indications they're taking Joe Burrow. I don't foresee any reason that they come off of that option. Minus an injury. We'll see if Joe Burrow decides to play in the Senior Bowl or come to the combine. Whether he decides to do drills or just throw or whatever. But minus an injury, I don't think Joe Burrow is anything but the number 1 pick. The real question is who's the number 2 quarterback coming off? Because, other than him, Chase Young is the next pick coming off. So there's a lot there. But as far as the game went, I did call that Clemson would come out of the half, make a stop, and be able to go down and score. Now, I kind of thought that would be the end of scoring for the third quarter, but of course, LSU had to score late in the third quarter just to make me look like an idiot. But then from there on, they just controlled the game. It was theirs. They knew it, and Clemson just wasn't able to do anything from that point forward that was anything positive towards their goal of winning. So, one of the most interesting things, though, is now LSU is going to lose
everything.
A ton of
everything.
Players.
I mean, seriously.
So we talk about Joe Burrow being number 1, but they've got several other potential first-round picks on that team.
So what's what's easier to describe on that front is how many players are staying. Not how many are leaving, but how many players are staying. You only have one draft-eligible offensive starter returning, being the right tackle, Austin Deculus, who's a junior. And then you have 2 sophomore wide receivers and a fullback who's not a starter, but, kind of in that starting rotation, 12th player. And he's a junior, but again, not a starter per se. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you only have 3 draft-eligible defensive starters returning. You got your defensive end, Glenn Logan, who's a junior, and Jacoby Stevens, who's also a junior, originally put defensive tackle. Safety or cornerback. He's a defensive back. Jacoby Stevens, who's a junior, and then nose tackle Tyler Shelvin, who was a redshirt sophomore, draft eligible. And then the only player after that is true fish cornerback Derek Stingley Jr., who actually played a very vital role in that win, but he's one of 4 returning people total in the defense. And then you also had passing game coordinator Joe Brady leave LSU to go back to the NFL, this time to the Carolina Panthers, being hired by former Baylor coach Matt Rule. And surprisingly enough, you had defensive coordinator Matt Aranda leave to fill the vacancy at Baylor and Matt Rule. So right now, LSU's probably cussing Matt Rule pretty hard, seeing that he stole their offensive game coordinator, who they credit with why they were so good offensively this year. And because he left, their defensive coordinators also defected and going to become a head coach over at Baylor. Kind of an interesting move, taking that position. But as we talked about before, an opportunity to make your name as a head coach and then jump ship and go somewhere even more impressive than Baylor or the Big 12 or, Baylor and the Big 12.
Well, we see what Baylor did for Matt Rule. Matt Rule came from Temple. He was, the coach to right the ship and stabilize them coming off of their investigations, coming off of, everything that was going on there. And then, in 3 years, now he's an NFL head coach. And, Matt Aranda sees the chance to go to Baylor, to a team that won 11 games last year, that was very competitive in the Big 12, that's got who'll be a senior quarterback in Brewer, who, they're going to have some good wide receivers.
I don't see Brewer ever playing another game after his concussion issues, but he is a senior, but I don't think he's returning. I think he retired.
Okay, well, I'm not aware of that, so if he did, then okay. But still, it's a team that won 11 games. There's some talent there, right? And now you come as being the defensive coordinator in LSU. All those 3-star guys that he was recruiting to LSU that didn't have a spot because they were, replaced by a 4- and 5-star guy being recruited at LSU, he can now go after to get at Baylor. Those low-tier 4-star, high-tier 3-star guys that, may not be impact day one when they step on campus, but with good coaching. So now he's had LSU to put him in the door of all of these big-name recruits, all of these different people, where he was able to get meetings with these guys, with these coaches, with whoever else in high school ranks, and be able to make it because LSU signs top recruiting classes. And now he's going to take that, and he's going to go to Baylor, and he's going to be the head coach in Baylor, where, who's the strongest team in the Big 12? You say Oklahoma, but, who's their quarterback next year? They're going to lose a lot. Ratley, I think is his name, right?
No, Rattler. He top 5-star he was a high school recruit, has been sitting patiently waiting his turn after all these transfers, but he looks to be the heir apparent over there in Soonerland. So
yeah, but he's an unproven entity, right? Whether he was a 5-star or not doesn't mean he's going to come into college football and be a stud. We've seen 3 stars win Heisman's. Joe Burrow was a 2-star when he went to Ohio State to be a career backup. So let's not just pretend, he was a 5-star recruit. That doesn't mean he's going to come out and he's going to be stellar, especially in year one. So you're not coming into a strong conference. You're coming somewhere where you can win games. 10 games a season should not be unrealistic to win in the Big 12 if you've got a half-decent team. So there's a lot of turmoil in the Big 12. There's a lot of turnover. Now, Kansas could very well be on the rise with Les Miles. We could very well see Kansas State making a resurgence. West Virginia, on the second year under its new head coach, could have a shot to regain some of its prominence. And who knows, maybe Texas is an every other year team. Maybe that's what we find out.
And maybe Iowa State's actually been pretty decent the last couple years. They've given State people fits. Bad, they've been giving people fits.
You still have Tech. You still have TCU, who's down, who's not as good right now. You're still going to play a cream puff out of conference schedule. So, I don't see that as a bad move for him to go to Baylor. I think he gets, 9-10 wins a season at a school that's perfectly acceptable at Baylor. They'll be tickled pink to get 9-10 win seasons. That's not the expectation there. So, give him that, and then the media will love him because he's taken a team and gotten them to 9-10 wins. He'll get Coach of the Year awards, and then an NFL job or a bigger head coaching job will open up for him 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
Exactly. So the one thing he is going to have to combat, and he does have as kind of a scapegoat on it, is in Texas, and recruiting Texas, is that if you recruit a player, you commit a player, and you cut bait with him, it's a black guy in the Texas high school coaching community, and they'll bar you from their campus. They won't let you recruit any more of their players. Now, he kind of does have that scapegoat saying, no, that wasn't me. That was Coach O. Coach O is the one who did that. I just, I recruited the best players available, and then Coach O would, take their commitments and then process them later on instead of just, remaining committed to them. So that's one thing that Texas high school coaches are very prevalent about. They like, if you take a commitment from a kid, you honor that commitment no matter what. So if you allow him to publicly commit to you after a scholarship offer and accept his commitment, and it's the player's choice to leave. It's not your choice to force him out. You can offer him a gray shirt, you can offer him a blue shirt, you can offer him, a couple of different options, but you can't cut ties with him once he's committed to your school. Otherwise, that coach, there's a good chance you'll never get back onto their campus. You saw A&M have issues recruiting North Shore for better part of 2 decades because, one of their all-time great running backs didn't perform up to their expectations, and some of their coaching staff had come from LSU, so they funneled all their players to LSU, K'Von Chasen being one of them. So A&M hasn't had very much luck recruiting that program for the better part of 2 decades. They first now have a commitment from that school of a high caliber, and that being a wide receiver in Shadrack Banks for 2021. Didn't get the 2020 commit out of Zach Evans. Things there are still ongoing, and we'll discuss that a little bit later on in the show. But if you do stuff like they were doing at LSU as a Texas college football coach, whatever it be, TCU, Texas Tech, A&M, Baylor, Houston, Rice, it doesn't matter. You will get run really quickly. You'll be, barred from schools and not allowed to come recruit. So he's going to have to distance himself from Coach O. He's going to have to distance himself from that reputation and, really establish good relationships here in the state of Texas, in which some may already have been soured because of that processing that they've done. So be very interesting to see how he recruits, this year with, the very short time frame that he has, already having missed early signing day, now having to try to make up any gaps he can in the second signing day coming up here in February. And then next year will be his true test. Like, how did he recruit next year? So if he can recruit at any kind of level that he did at LSU, he'll be fine. But it's Baylor. They don't have the resources like LSU does. They don't have the name like LSU does. He's
They
still a
also
good
don't have the
coach. He's still got that
expectations.
reputation, but we'll see.
But Baylor doesn't have the expectations that LSU does. Nobody in Waco expects a top 5 class. They understand what they are, and I don't think I think there's probably 1 or 2 donors who think they can go and get a top 2, top 3 class, but I don't think anybody there is under any assumption. They know they're going to take the mid-level tier talent and they're going to have to make something of them. They're going to have to take the middling 4 stars to the top 3 stars and make something out of them. They're going to have to play smart football, a different style of football, and they're going to have to win playing differently than other people play. And if Matt Aranda can bring SEC defense to the Big 12, he's got a shot. Because we saw what SEC defenses have done to the Big 12 historically. The air raid that almost the entire Big 12, the spread that almost the entire Big 12 has moved to, does not fare very well against the big corners that the SEC likes to play. And the press smash mouth football and get after you with the defensive line. So I think, for Matt Aranda, this was a decent landing spot. Is it the prestige job? No. But is it a building block? I would say very much so. It's a building block job to get him to the next job. And I think Baylor is going to be that.
It's very interesting because he was the highest paid coordinator in general, but specifically the defensive coordinator. He was getting $2.5 million a year over at LSU after Jimbo took a run at him. LSU locked him up and gave him, backed up the Brinks truck to keep him, giving him 2.5 to keep him there in Baton Rouge. So it wasn't money. That's the reason he left. You are hearing some murmurs, and I'm not saying it's smoke. I'm not saying it's fire, but there's smoke that, Coach O is a very tough personality to work with. He's a very coarse person. He's not someone that if you have the choice, you don't work for him. Now, these are murmurs. These can be completely false, but you do see a lot of turnover after this year. You're seeing almost the entire offense go. You're seeing almost the entire defense go. You're seeing, the offensive passing game coordinator go. You're seeing the defensive coordinator go. You're seeing an almost complete gutting of this staff. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens moving forward with Coach O.
I think the telltale thing there is you're not seeing anybody make a lateral move. Everybody has made a upwards move. Everybody who's leaving is leaving for a better position. Whether it be, Joe Brady leaving for a offensive coordinator position in the NFL or Matt Aranda leaving for a head coach job. So this is not, if this was a bunch of lateral moves, people just taking the same job somewhere else, I would give that rumor a little more credence. But this is not that. This is them leaving because they had a better opportunity. And yes, that's going to happen after your team just went on a historic run and wins a national title. People are going to want the people who made that happen, whether it be the players or whether it be the coaches. Coach O, we know, is not going anywhere, and he has no reason to. Right? He's from Louisiana. LSU is his school. This is his dream job. He's not going anywhere. And yeah, I do think he's probably, one of those guys that, spits fire and, eats nails. But it also seems like the people who love him. Now, I'm sure there's people who hate him that hate him. But the people who love him, which sounds like his players do, boy, they do. They love him and have no issues with him whatsoever.
Well, how many of those draft eligible guys that are leaving are actually going to get drafted? Now, I would say quite a few, but I don't think every single one does. So, I don't know. That's splitting hairs. It's interesting. It's interesting to watch. I don't think they'll have nearly the year they had this year, obviously. I think they'll go back to like a 8 to 9 win season. But I also don't think the LSU fans are going to have any issues with that because they know we just won it all and we're completely rebuilding now. This is a rebuilding year for LSU. You know,
I would hope most LSU fans understand that you're losing the most prolific pocket passer in NCAA history. You're losing some great defensive talent, some great offensive talent. It's probably going to be a mild step back next year. Now, I think the question is how big of a step do they take back? Is it a 10-win season? Fine. Is it an 8-win season? There's probably some issues. But LSU recruits well enough. I don't think that's really the issue. All right, so we're talking about these guys getting drafted. We're talking about them going on in the NFL. So of course, once we get to the NFL, we start talking the NFL playoffs going on right now. So Sunday, I win. By the way, suck it, loser.
Yes,
I win.
You did.
So you picked Tennessee to go into Kansas City and beat Kansas City. I told you we would know the outcome of that game in the first 5 minutes.
And you were wrong on that because Kansas City did the exact same thing that they did against Texans. Came out flat. Tennessee was dominating the first portion of that game, and then almost the exact same script happened. Kansas City decides to start playing and just clamps down.
I also said in the same sentence that there's no score too big for Kansas City to overcome. That part I was absolutely correct on. And once Kansas City gets rolling, it is entire. So here's what I saw happen. Tennessee came out and tried to dominate the ground, and they did so in their first 2 drives. But when they were unable to capitalize on their first drive with a touchdown, I kind of went, ooh, that's not good. Because you can't score field goals against Kansas City. You need to punch it in the end zone. Now, we did see them come on their next drive and manage to score a touchdown with a pass to, I guess you call that a fullback. But so I'll say this. Ryan Tannehill had a great game. Ryan Tannehill throws two touchdown passes, over 200 yards. I thought Ryan Tannehill was fantastic. But the problem with it is that Kansas City was able to make such a good run that Tennessee could no longer play its game. They could no longer pound the ball. They had to start putting the ball in the air. And although Ryan Tannehill had a very good game, it was too little, too late. They didn't have enough weapons to be able to take on Kansas City. And Tyrann Mathieu played like a man possessed.
Yeah, I watched the tail end of that game. I didn't get to watch the beginning of it. We were going to visit family, but I did get to watch the tail end of it, and it looked like Tennessee was trying to, get back into it. And Kansas City, Tyrann Mathieu just said nope, and they played lights out defense there at the end, and it was pretty impressive how well they played. I couldn't really say much more about that. They just did what they did. And then flip over to the next game, and the Green Bay Packers get throttled just like Tennessee did. You see San Francisco's defense just come out and just shut down Aaron Rodgers for a majority of that game.
I'll argue that although the score in Tennessee looked bad, Tennessee played a good game.
Yeah.
They came to play. They came out. They knocked Kansas City in the face. And they were in that game for 3 quarters. Whereas
they had the confidence. They had the confidence from the previous 2 games to play. That they had the ability to come and win.
Green Bay was not in that game versus San Francisco from the first minute the ball got kicked off. I mean, that was San Francisco's game from the start to the finish. Now, the Packers made it a little bit interesting late, but I wasn't able to watch the end of the game. I did see the score tighten, but still, I mean, San Francisco handed it to Green Bay.
Yeah, that was a pretty impressive performance all around by San Francisco. I saw a meme come out, and I sent it to you as well. It said, if only Aaron Rodgers had Allstate instead of State Farm, he would have been prepared for mayhem like this. And it just showed that the San Francisco D line just swarming his ass. It was, and that was pretty much the story of his day. The defensive line just swarming his ass.
Yeah, we both thought that Green Bay would win that game, and so we were both wrong on that one. But at the same time, I did say that the D line of San Francisco is very talented. Nick Bosa,
Demontre Moore.
He went to the AFL and ended up getting a spot on the San Francisco 49ers and has done something with it. So, congratulations to him. D Ford played well on that D-line. There's some other players there that have played really well. Now, one name who did make a couple big plays in that game on the Green Bay side, not the tight end, but the defensive tackle, Kiki, made some big plays for Green Bay, a former Aggie.
I mean, Jay Sternberger did catch his first career touchdown in the game too, so he's come on in the postseason and finally broke through and got his first touchdown. But I wouldn't say he had no impact. But Kiki, yeah, he definitely shined. That was one of the few bright points for Green Bay on the defensive line.
Yeah, definitely some good stuff there from a former Aggie. So, I mean, looking forward, we're going to have San Francisco, Kansas City. Now, I'm going to delay making a pick for a week because we have the Pro Bowl coming up. So, next week we'll pick who we think wins the Super Bowl. But I'm going to tell you who I'm rooting for. And this is from me being a Cowboys homer. I'm going to tell you why I'm rooting for this team. So I'm going to root for Kansas City for twofold reasons. Number one, Kansas City is originally from Dallas. They were originally the Dallas Texans. So that is number one reason. Number two is that the Cowboys and San Francisco are tied with 5 Super Bowl wins. So if San Francisco were to win this game, there's 2 teams with 6 Super Bowl wins. That's Pittsburgh and New England. Now, it's impressive to think that New England has won all 6 of theirs since 2001. They had none before that, and they've gone from having none in 2001 to having 6 where we are today, all with the same quarterback, mind you. So that's very impressive. Now, Pittsburgh has 6. Of course, they won 4 real early, and then they won 1 a little bit later. And now, they won 3 with Terry Bradshaw. They won 1, and then they won, of course, another one with Ben Roethlisberger as a quarterback. And they've got 6. So the other one there that's coming up is either San Francisco or Dallas will be next to 5. Or next to 6.
Yeah, next to 6.
So I'm going to root for Kansas City. Now, I might not. I'm going to study the games a little more and decide who I'm going to pick, and I'm going to defer to next week before making a pick. But I'm definitely rooting for Kansas City.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same. Either way, you're going to have a couple Aggies get some Super Bowl rings. You've got Demontre Moore as a defensive lineman, and then you got Johnny Holland as a coach for San Francisco. And then over at Kansas City, you have Armani Watts, and I believe there's another player, but it's escaping me who it would be. So either way, you're going to see an Aggie get a Super Bowl ring, which is always cool. Would have been even cooler to see Ryan Tannehill get one and be the first Texas quarterback to make it to the Super Bowl. But props to Pat Mahomes over at Texas Tech getting there first. Give him his due. That gentleman has played outstanding all year. So I'll say the same. I think Kansas City is who I'll be rooting for. I like San Francisco, but I don't love them. I like Kansas City, but I don't love them. I don't really love any NFL franchise per se. I know you're Cowboys to death, but to me they're a lot like the Longhorns, and I just can't stand the Longhorns. And Cowboys fans remind me a lot of them, bragging about the past without a lot of to show currently. So for me, meh. But yeah, I typically root for whoever has the most Aggies on the team. So with that said, I know of 2 Aggies for San Francisco, and I know of 1 Aggie for Kansas City. That could be wrong. There could be more at Kansas City, but those are the ones I know about. So by that metric alone, I'd have to say San Francisco. But let me do a little bit more research and see how many Aggies are exactly on Kansas City before I make my official pick. So we'll defer it till next week.
I've pulled it up on our lads. It is 1-1. So you have DeMontre Moore for San Francisco, and you have Armani Watts for Kansas City. The only teams with more than 1 Aggie are the Cardinals, the Ravens, the Bengals, the Browns, the Cowboys, the Lions, the Packers, the Jaguars.
I thought you were going to say the Bears. Oh, my.
No, the Buccaneers, and that's it. So the Buccaneers have Justin Evans and Mike Evans, the strong safety and wide receiver, both starters. The Cardinals have Brandon Williams, cornerback, who's a starter, and Christian Kirk, who's a starter. Then Toro Alaka and Dalen Mack are both on the Ravens. Neither of which one is anywhere close to sniffing the field. Then Randy Bullock, who was a kicker way back at A&M.
Not that far.
And Travion Williams are in Cincinnati. Then you have Myles Garrett, Damian Ratley, and Ricky Seals-Jones are in Cleveland. Michael Bennett, Donovan Wilson, both in Dallas. Traw Carson and Don Mulback are both in Detroit. Don Mulback is the starting long snapper there.
And
then,
of course, that's an interesting story there because he's been there forever.
Yeah.
And he's a long snapper, so he's probably going to be there forever still. But he's a great long snapper. He's been Pro Bowler quite often.
Yeah. So then in Green Bay, we just hit on those 2. There's Kiki Kingley and Jay Sternberger. Sitting in Jacksonville, we have Josh Lambo. He's the kicker there. And then Cedric Abwehi, who was originally with the Bengals. So he's now the backup left and right tackle for the Jaguars. And then the only other one you have, like I said, is Tampa Bay with Mike Evans and Justin Evans. So those are the only teams that have more than 1 Aggie. But there are
coaching staff Johnny Holland for San Francisco kind of tips the scales. So, and because you want to go for the Chiefs, for fun and for parity, I'll go with San Francisco for who I'm rooting for. But we'll refrain on making picks until next week. Get a little bit closer to the game, and we'll go at that time and make our actual predictions.
Yeah, I think that's the best. So, okay. So you hit on it earlier, but I mean, we got to talk a little bit of college basketball. It's not really my thing. I don't really get interested in college basketball until it's time for the tournament. But you're more of a college sports fan overall. So I think, college basketball resonates a little bit to you, especially Aggie basketball. Shockingly, we're going to talk about A&M, Aggie basketball. But, I mean, for me, NBA basketball, college basketball, doesn't really matter. I care about it when it gets time for something to actually happen. When we're talking March Madness or we're talking NBA playoffs. And usually it's not even the first round of NBA playoffs because so many teams make the NBA playoffs.
That's not very interesting, to be honest.
Yeah, so usually once we get to the second and then the third rounds of the playoffs, do I actually start to care? But March Madness is fun. Everybody, I think, likes March Madness because you get to build your bracket, and get it watched. And, of course, there's that bad beat that decimates your entire bracket. One of your final 4 picks goes out game 1, and, you're left sitting there going, shit. So let's talk college basketball for just a few minutes.
Sure. So I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of the same way. I follow A&M. I would love to be able to attend the games, but don't have season tickets this year. They're going to try to correct that next year if possible. 12th man, if you're listening and you want to bequeath me some tickets or some press passes, feel free. I have sent y'all some emails trying to get some interviews, but if y'all want to finally respond to me, that'd be awesome. If y'all want to send me some press passes, which I highly, 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 highly doubt, but hey, I would love to attend the games for free and somehow, but I'll gladly pay for them if that's what it comes down to. outside of the A&M, I mean, I'll look at highlights. I don't, or things that come across my phone as notifications, close games, something of that nature. I don't necessarily follow it as close as I would when it gets closer to the March Madness. That's when it really gets fun, entertaining. But you do want to see kind of which teams have a chance at making it. So I kind of watch especially let's say about early February, mid-February, I start really watching the bubble watch, kind of see which teams are in, which teams are out, and then I really start paying attention. But right now, it's kind of the slow period. You just got all the kids got back from Christmas break, and now you're starting to see the games start to actually pick up and actually happen more frequently. Over the Christmas break, you were seeing one game a week. Now that they're back, you'll see 2 games a week. So we hit on it earlier. A&M played 2 games last week. First game was against LSU, the defending SEC conference regular season champions. Had the lead going into the final minutes. LSU stormed back, was able to tie it up, and had the ball with under 20 seconds and could have won. But A&M played some exceptional defense to put it into overtime. But unfortunately, just were not able to withstand the onslaught the LSU Tigers were able to put on them, and unfortunately in overtime dropped that game. And then you had South Carolina came onto campus Saturday, and A&M had a lead for like a minute, maybe not even that. They were playing pretty good ball up to that point, but South Carolina was just raining threes. If I remember correctly, they were 16 of 30 for threes, and it wasn't just one player. They had 4 players who had multiple 3-point attempts and multiple 3-point made. That's hard to defend when it's multiple players that are hot. One player, 2 players, you can kind of shut them down. But when you have 3-4 players who can all hit from that distance and at a high rate, it's very hard to defend. And they were also getting a lot of offensive rebounds, which, second chance points, which always kills you when you're trying to defend that. When the other team is just getting second chance after second chance to get points. So A&M fell there too. They went 0-2 last week. They've got a game coming up this week. See if I can find it real quick. I apologize. I should have had this already. SEC. Come on. There we go. So I know, they play Missouri on Monday or Tuesday, tomorrow night. So currently we're sitting at 8-8. 500 for the season, and 2-3 in SEC. Now, the fun thing about that is that A&M was only predicted to win 1 conference game all year. The fact that they've already won 2, hey, they've beaten expectations, but you never want to, settle for, hey, we beat expectations. You always want to strive for the best possible outcome, make it to the big dance if possible. So, A&M's going to Missouri, who's 1-4 in the SEC, 9-8 overall. Good chance to rebound and get a good win. But Missouri's, always been a good program. So we'll see what happens. I don't see a line on this game. I don't understand why the ESPN app or ESPN website sometimes shows lines and sometimes doesn't. Because, the 2 games before this game, Kentucky, Georgia, both of those have lines on them, but A&M Missouri doesn't have a line. I guess it's just because it's not a top 20, no top 25 teams or no leading the conference teams. So no line on it that I can find here on ESPN, but I think A&M has a good chance to taking that, going on the road and winning that game. But, they got to go out and prove it, got to go out and win. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, again, like I've said all season, we're seeing a weird trend in college basketball where, the top team, Baylor is now the number 1 team. So it's definitely not your blue blood programs getting to number 1. It's not Duke, it's not Kentucky, it's not Kansas. It's a weird year for college basketball. And it's one of those years where it seems like maybe these blue bloods get it right going into March and going into the tournament. But could we see one of these blue bloods not even make the tournament? And I mean, I think that's purely speculation, and there would need to be more losses for that to happen. But I mean, the losses we've seen so far are not losses you expect. Does this open up for some smaller programs to make the tournament, to try to make a name for themselves? And I think, there's a lot to be said here when you start talking about, the fact that we're opening it up to more teams. And that's going to make March Madness a lot more fun when we start seeing some other names getting involved, some names that haven't been there in a while, or start seeing some programs, seeing some programs that shouldn't be there on a normal basis get a chance to go dance. Does A&M squeak in? Are they an NIT team? Where do we sit? Do we have some of these, games that aren't traditional matchups where we're able to actually get some real Cinderella dancing competition? And for me, like I said, because for me, not watching the regular season, not really paying that much attention to it, the interest is in where, what happens in March Madness, what happens when the brackets hit. You're still going to have Duke, you're still going to have Kansas, you're still going to have Kentucky, and these are going to be good teams going in the tournament. Teams that can beat any other team on any given night. But we've seen, that they're not necessarily going to be able to just roll through the tournament like they have in the past. They're not going to be, the number one is the number one, and that's it. So it'll be quite interesting to see, what the selection committee decides, and then moving forward also how everybody is able to go once they actually get into tournament play. You have San Diego State currently sitting at number 4. Florida State, which is not a traditional basketball powerhouse, sits at 5. Dayton is at 7. So, I mean, there's definitely some teams here. Kentucky's currently 15. Tech is 18. Texas is not even in the top 25. So it's very interesting to see what's going to happen moving into the tournament. And, that for me, as a fan who's very casual and who only starts really picking up on it when we get to that point in time, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, so this will be one of the years that you really don't want to play chalk when it comes to March Madness. You really want to take a look at the lines on each game and see the probability of winning. Even that's not going to be 100% foolproof, but playing chalk this year in the March Madness contest is not a wise decision. So with that said, tonight we had a couple games. You had Baylor, the number 1 team, taking on Oklahoma at home. They were able to squeak out a victory 61-57. And then you had Texas go visit West Virginia, and they lost handedly. I mean, they just got shellacked.
I just saw that.
59-97. Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, shellacked. That's right at 40 points. So very, very one-sided game there. And then, yeah, as you were saying, just whole lot of difference this year when it comes to the rankings. You're not seeing those typical teams. Now, I will argue that Florida State actually has been a pretty decent program the last 5-6 years. Not top 10, but pretty decent. They're making the tournament. They're seeing success in the tournament. So they're good. They're not great, but they are from the ACC, which plays typically is a very high level of basketball. You got your Duke, your UNCs, your Virginia, typically very good schools for basketball. You got those power programs, those blue bloods, as you like to say. So, Florida State being up because UNC's down doesn't really surprise me. This good does surprise me a little bit. You got Louisville right behind them. So you got in the top 5, you have 2 Big 12 schools, and then you have Gonzaga. They're some little no-name conference. I can't remember the name of the conference. But they're, the big fish in little pond out there when it comes to basketball. San Diego State, very surprising to see them that high. And then, Florida, Louisville, Dayton, Duke, Villanova, Seton Hall. So Seton Hall's historically been a pretty good program as well. I think they're in the Big East or the Beast Conference. Michigan State from the or not from Pac-12, but the Big 12 or the Big 10, which has 14 teams, always confusing, and the Big 12 who has 10. So yeah, it's definitely a very interesting year this year when it comes to rankings and how teams have played and fared. Not your traditional, expectant wins. So yeah, don't bet chalk. That's the Schumann Brothers Unfiltered recommendation for March Madness. Do not bet chalk.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and brackets are going to be busted. What was it last year? That by the second round there was only like 5 brackets that were perfect on ESPN's challenge. So I mean, some big games, some big teams went down very early. So this year, I think, will be even worse. It's just going to be so hard to predict that we're going to see some big names go down super early. So, getting into the next topic, which is one of your favorites, let's talk a little bit about, we saw the early signing period, but we're quickly approaching the actual deadline to sign. Well, I guess it's not the true 100% deadline, but National Signing Day is coming up. So give us an update on college football recruiting.
So I'll give you the A&M perspective because I don't follow, like I said, don't follow every school.
Shockingly.
Right. Shockingly. A&M is down to 2 options left for the 2020 class. Yes, 2020 class. And you saw some potential transfer or, initial counters is what they can take. So if it be a transfer, JUCO, grad transfer, high school commit, whatever it be, they all count against the initial counter 25. So A&M has 2 positions left in that initial counter, currently sitting at 23 signed commitments. So just 2 spaces they're looking for. We had talked about Zach Evans out of North Shore. And it was rumored that he might have enrolled in classes at A&M and was going to start school this week and become an Aggie because he already signed a national letter of intent with Georgia and then backed out of that. He and Georgia parted ways and nullified that NLI. So he's no longer capable of signing an LLI. He can just sign financial aid paperwork, but he can sign that to as many schools as he wants. So A&M, was heavily after him, 5-star number 1 running back recruit in the nation, very heavily desired in a position of need as well. But over the weekend, you saw A&M bring in not 1, but 2 running backs for visits. You saw a JUCO out of Kilgore College come and visit, and his little brother is a top-ranked tight end for the class of 2021. And let's see if I can find his name. Of course, not now. Wow. Oh, here we go. Ernest Crownover, out of Kilgore College there out in East Texas. And then you had another high school kid come in from Surprise, Arizona on an official visit, and his last name is Hubbard. Now, over the weekend, you saw Crownover actually commit to A&M, and it was officially announced that he had committed to A&M. Some people are speculating that it might have been as a preferred walk-on, but the power, the true power players in that industry are saying it was an official offer for an actual position. And then you have people debating if he's going to be a running back or if he's going to be a fullback, because he is a little bit on the heavier side. He is more of a power back in the 220, 230 range. So is he coming in as a running back or is he coming as a fullback? That's yet to be determined, because you also saw, Hubbard come in on an official visit, and then all of a sudden today you're seeing the national pundits crystal ball him to A&M, which is kind of interesting because that would mean A&M is taking 4 running backs in this class. They need running backs, don't get me wrong, and they're short. They only had the 1 proven entity in true freshman on campus, but after that, there really wasn't anything else. So you had a lot of people either transfer out, get hurt, career-ending injuries. So running back depth had very much depleted, but you're seeing not 1, not 2, not 3, but maybe potentially 4 running backs with the nation's number 1 running back still out there. But that nation's number one running back, Zach Evans, took an official visit over the weekend to Ole Miss and is rumored to be going to Florida later in the month, which would be, potentially the weekend before signing day. Now, again, he's not signing on signing day. He can announce a commitment, but he's not bound to that school. It's a little weird that he did graduate high school in December in order to enroll early, but it's looking like he's not going to take advantage of that early enrollment period and get on a campus this spring to be able to take part of spring practice, which is, the reason most of these commits graduate early is so they can get on campus, get adjusted to college life, participate in spring ball, and be, that much further ahead when it comes to the falls. They've got that experience with the coaching staff. They've got that, depth chart, kind of figured out a little bit, and they know how to, figure out how to move up the depth chart as needed to be able to play that first year, or, go play special teams or whatever it may be just to see the field. Most of them don't come in thinking they're going to redshirt. They think they're going to play 3 years, go to the pro. So him graduating early and then, for the lack of better words, squandering that opportunity to be on campus is kind of, peculiar. You've got a lot of people saying he's being, pulled in certain ways by his family, by his friends, by his, former coaching staff. And, if I can give any words of advice, to this kid, it's, choose what's best for you, man. If that's A&M, great. I would love it. But if it's Georgia, if you want to go back there, honor your original commitment, you want to go to LSU, you want to go to Ole Miss, Florida, whatever it be, pick something and stick with it. And that's it, man. Don't play this transfer portal stuff either. You need to pick something and be firm in your commitment. Decide what you want to do and do it for you. Don't do it for your family. Don't do it for your friends. Do what's best for you and your career, because you only get one chance at this. And it's ultimately, all those other people that are saying this stuff don't mean jack diddly when it comes to actually playing. The only person that matters is you and your abilities. So you need to find somewhere that's good for you, that's a good fit for what your talents are, and go play and ball out and make the NFL if that's what your future holds.
So, in other big college football news, just announced D'Eriq King, the former quarterback at Houston, has officially announced he will transfer to Miami, where another former Aggie commit currently sits as the backup quarterback, Tate Martell, having already transferred from Ohio State. So
Tathan Martell, not Tate. Tathan.
Okay. Either which way.
He got his butt hurt. Like to make fun of him.
He got his. They literally say Tate Martell. But
yeah, okay. I know his official name's Tathan. We like to make fun of. We like to use his proper name to kind of poke fun at him. He's once an Aggie commit, like you pointed out, and then spurned us to go to Ohio State, and then transferred to Miami. He got immediately eligible, and now he's probably going to transfer again because D'Eriq King's going to come in and just immediately take that job.
So, he's a redshirt sophomore, and, he didn't start last year, probably won't start this year, which means he'd be a redshirt junior before finally maybe seeing the field in Miami. So, like you just mentioned, there's a strong possibility he attempts to transfer again. Now, I would argue the best landing spot for him is where D'Eriq King just left.
That's definitely a possibility, but if you watched him in their bowl game, if you watched him play any this season, which was very, very few snaps, he looked like absolute dog shit. He was considered a top mobile quarterback, and he looked like he had 5.2 speed. Just slow, flat-footed, and couldn't throw. I don't know if it's a psyche thing, if he got fat from not playing and getting.
He was billed as the next Johnny Manziel.
Dude, yeah, he was billed as being the next thing. And
wait,
God, Lord,
hold on. Speaking of Johnny Manziel, have you seen the new commercial?
I've seen it in the past. Is it Direct Auto?
Direct Auto. So I personally think it's great. I personally love.
poking personal fun at himself in an attempt to, help his career. And hey, I'm all about self-deprecating humor. I do it all the time. It works great. I'm easy to make fun of, so I might as well be doing it myself.
Well, that's it, right? You take all the power away when you make fun of yourself. So I personally think it's a great move by Johnny Manziel. It makes him some money. Probably not a lot, but something. Like he says, he doesn't know where his next paycheck's coming from. So at least he's doing something positive with his life. He's making some damn income. So, and yeah, like you said, he's taking the own mockery of himself. He's owning it and moving forward. If I was an NFL GM right now, this would say to me, or an XFL GM, and the XFL has already come out and said Johnny Manziel is not a part of their future, but this would kind of make me reconsider and say, you know what? If he's willing to own up to his previous issues, then maybe he's worth giving that third, fourth chance to. Will he ever be a starting quarterback in the NFL? Probably, no. Let's just probably say it. But could he be a viable backup to somebody? He probably could. He'd make
a great scout team quarterback when people are playing the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. And I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson, but he's at least a comparable, he's at least comparable in comparison to him, able to run, able to pass. And right now you've got NFL teams putting wide receivers in as, the mock Lamar Jackson. So if nothing else, he could be that for your team, which is still a viable position.
I think about what the Saints have done with Taysom Hill. He was the third string quarterback. They'd bring him in at tight end. They'd bring him in at running back, and he'd throw the ball. It was, they've just kind of used the guy for whatever the hell he can do. And he can do a lot of different things. And it's really helped out their offense because, there's not, other than Michael Thomas, there's not a real width of options in New Orleans. So Taysom Hill, look, Drew Brees could very well retire, and Teddy Bridgewater is a free agent. He very well could be out. Taysom Hill could be the starting quarterback starting next season. A quarterback like Johnny Manziel, who now comes in and, he could play a little bit of slot wide receiver. He could play a little bit of, probably not running back, but, throw him the ball, let him pass it from there, or he can make a break and see if he can get some yards. I think there's a room for him in a position like that, not as an every down quarterback, but as a guy that comes in, gives you some weaponry, some other options, some ways to fold out your defense or offense and make the defense really pay attention to him when he's on the field, opening up possibly some other plays.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very interesting to see, him in that role. I think honestly he would be a good running back because, when he got into the open field, he was very elusive. And you saw him run all over the SEC defenses once he got into the open field and broke through the, line of scrimmage. So he could be a great running back. And he's got, well, at least he had good speed. It's been a few years since he's been on the field. He played in the CFL for a while, didn't do great up there, but played. It'd just be interesting to see what he could do in that capacity. Huh?
He had played in the AFL with the Memphis team, and he wasn't bad.
No.
He actually was pretty decent there and actually looked like a reasonable quarterback option. But, it'll remain to see what happens with him and, whether or not he gets a chance. But I think this commercial, it just popped in my mind because you started talking about, this stuff. I think the commercial really, I don't know, it kind of enlightened me to him a little bit that, hey, he's willing to be made fun of. He's willing to take responsibility for his own dumb shit actions and move forward from them.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the XFL if you see a slew of injuries. Because then you could see franchise reaching out to him to see about the potential of being a backup at the XFL level. And then if even more injuries happen, then potentially getting a chance to shine there as well. Now that's a lot of ifs. That's a lot of buts. That's a lot of what ifs, this has to happen. This has to happen. But stranger things have indeed happened, and you've seen players come out of mediocrity and come out of infamy and make it in the NFL in the past. So, there's always that chance. There's going to be a team, if he stays fit, if he stays, healthy, if he's, keeps up with the regimen and keeps passing and keeps, going to workouts, there's eventually going to be a team who says, screw it, let's get someone at least on our scout team who can represent this new age of quarterback that's the gunslinger / runner, and we need to be able to really practice against that, and this is the best option to practice against that, is this former Heisman winner. I honestly don't see him ever making it, but I would love to eat crow on that as well. I pull for the kid or the young gentleman. And he's got all the potential in the world. Now, can he actually, make something of it? We'll see.
Well, and again, do I think he's a viable franchise starting quarterback? No. But do I think he's a valid, legitimate backup in the league? I do think he can be that. I think he could come in and spell a team for 2-3 games and, team just off the top of my head, teams that he would fit well in.
Philly.
Seattle. Seattle has Russell Wilson. Now, is he Russell Wilson? No. But can he do some of the things Russell Wilson does? Yes. He can extend plays. He can make some oddball throws. That's a team where I think he can do. Baltimore would be another option, replacing Lamar Jackson if he had to come in. It wouldn't force him to change. And then Kansas City, because we've seen Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes extends plays, and he's kind of unconventional. And I think that's another place where he could be a legitimate backup, that where if the starter went out, you don't have to change your offense, your scheme, to go to another quarterback who plays completely differently than the guy who's starting. So I'm just thinking of it in those terms. Again, does he get a shot? Does he impress? Maybe. He was a first-round draft pick, and those guys, there's not a lot of them. So maybe he comes back. Maybe he figures something out. Maybe he gets things straight, and he comes back and he's a viable NFL quarterback. But I think that time may have passed for him, but I do think he can be a solid backup in the league and get 4, 5, 6 years of being, that's a lot of money to be a backup in the NFL.
So I'll present 2 scenarios. The first scenario, and I kind of chimed in on it earlier, is Philadelphia. What could they have done this year with him as a backup instead of their 40-year-old, was it Josh McCown? Just, father time out there playing football. Huh?
Luke McCown.
He's still old dude. When he had that opportunity to run, if it had been Johnny running, Johnny would have scored the touchdown. But the 40-year-old man tried to run, had the big opening, but because he's 40 years old and slow, got caught pretty quickly, taken down, and it was at the 3-yard line, only had to hop, skip, and jump, and he'd been in. Johnny would have made that. Guaranteed. Philly, don't say they're still in the playoffs, but they at least have a chance to win that game with Johnny. The other scenario, and this one's a kind of a flyer, but it's been known to happen in this organization where they kind of take chances on players that they can get on the cheap. Do you know who I'm talking about?
You're probably talking about the Dallas Cowboys.
Nope. Good try. One more.
Oh, let's think. Organizations like to take cheap players. I mean, everybody likes cheap players, man.
But have been historically really good at taking those cheap players and making them products out of them.
I'm sorry. I mean, the Cowboys consistently take former number 1 overall, first round draft picks. The Cowboys try to make reclamation projects out of them all the time. So, okay, you're talking about the Patriots.
Yes. If he got into Bill Belichick's system and studied under Bill, now he's not going to have any chance to study under Tom Brady. Maybe one more year, but I don't know. I thought I saw something today that came across the wire that Tom Brady had left, but was that wrong? Tom Brady's no longer a Patriot. Did I hear that, or was that incorrect?
I mean, he's a free agent. Now it'll be interesting to find out whether or not he leaves. He has said that he's open to the possibility of leaving, which is different than years past. But, I don't expect him to leave. I don't expect him to go anywhere. And the last we knew, he had said he wanted to play 4 or 5 more years. So do I believe he packs his bags and heads somewhere else? And then the question would be, where does he go?
The rumor there would be the Chargers, since they're trying. No, not the Chargers. Yeah, the Chargers, since they got that new stadium in LA and they're trying to sell tickets. So that would be one place he could go. But yeah, so if he were to stay in New England with Bill Belichick and they were to take a flyer on Johnny, that would be a great, reclamation project for Bill and his style. He's known to have those players that just, burnt bridges or had some issues and then, get over there at New England and just go out and play ball, buy into the team culture they have there and just go out and win. As you said earlier, six Super Bowl wins since 2001. They didn't do that with top tier talent. They've always done that with a couple top tier players and then a very good team chemistry. So, having an all time GOAT in Tom Brady definitely helped, but they've had many other, mid tier players that turned out to be really good in that system. So it'll be interesting to see if, Bill Belichick and his Patriots would take a flyer on Johnny. Don't know if it'll happen, but I know Mr. Kraft is a very big, Republican guy, so he likes reclamation projects as well. That could happen. I mean, that would be one of the few places I could see him, sitting the bench for a little bit and then, getting an opportunity further on down the line and really making a moment at that time.
So, I mean, yeah, it'd be very interesting to see what happens there. But personally, do I see the Patriots taking him? No, I don't see that. That's not I don't think that's a Belichick. He doesn't want to bring. The thing that Belichick doesn't want is he doesn't want distractions in his locker room. This is why Tim Tebow did not work in New England, because he doesn't. Tim Tebow became a distraction, so he got rid of Tim Tebow. All right.
Yeah. It can be argued that Johnny's been out of the limelight just long enough to no longer be a distraction, but then again, who knows?
I still think, he's still Johnny Manziel. He's still, whoever signs him is going to get publicity by the signing. Whether he's been out of the limelight or not, he's going to get it. Okay, so there's a couple other things I wanted to hit on this week, that we haven't really talked about yet. But, we talked about the China Phase 1 deal. So, we agreed not to add more tariffs, not to reduce any of the ones we currently have, but just not to add any more. In return, we are getting some additional farm buying. We're getting some additional IP protection, intellectual property protection. We're getting some other agreements along with the deal that are pretty good for us. Of course, we're re-upping our commitment to buy Chinese goods and continue to import them into our market and allow them to import with, little to no, once the full trade deals are signed and we have completed the entire thing and we know, the tariffs will be removed and, there won't be tariffs placed on any Chinese goods as long as they follow the trade deal. So we already kind of went over, the whole, China's just going to renege on the deal. Okay, that's possible. It's 100% possible. But, they can renege on any trade deal. Which trade deal could they not renege on? So if they can renege on this one, they can renege on anyone. The only difference is that at least while President Trump is president, they know that reneging means that those tariffs are going to go right back in place. That those tariffs are going to come right back and they're going to get put right back on. And the Chinese economy is being hurt by these tariffs. Don't buy into what the left-wing media tells you that we're paying for it. Yes, has there been a slight increase in some imported goods? Yes. But the Chinese firms are taking a major hit, and we are finding other trade partners to go after. China is scrambling to replace us as a trade partner. And the reason they're finally coming back to the table is they finally just realized that they can add as many countries they want to the table. It doesn't match our market and our market share, our market size, and the capacity of money that's in our market. And they need access to our market.
Yeah, you see the effect of that in the fact that the Hong Kong protests are still ongoing. If China thought they had a viable option outside of the U.S., who is backing Hong Kong, by the way, if they thought they had any viable option other than the U.S., they'd had already gone into Hong Kong, killed all the protesters, just like they did Tiananmen Square, taking control of that region and just brought them back in underneath the Beijing model. And you would never, it wouldn't even have made much news. It would have been completely, silent. It was just gone. The West wouldn't have heard much about it unless there was an embedded reporter. It would have just been swept under the rug. China does what China does. And, that's, complete control of their people and with their government. Especially with the Great Firewall of China. And then because Hong Kong was emboldened to do their protests because they were backed publicly by Trump, you see Taiwan doing a very similar thing, re-electing a president who said, we're going to distance ourselves from Beijing, even after Beijing threatened them that if they didn't come back to the table as part of One China, that they were going to impose One China on Taiwan. So to see the Taiwanese people emboldened to, step out from underneath the mainland China and then start to become their own people, that would have never happened had China had secured better trade deals with countries that could actually truly replace us. Because now that they have to actually play ball with us, they're not going to step over, they're not going to overstep their bounds when they know that we're watching and we know that we're paying attention to these things. And these are probably not, on paper, but they are probably a part of the trade deal, back channel negotiation saying, hey, we're not going to write this down. We're not going to say it out loud. But if you do anything in these two regions, these tariffs are back in place immediately. So that's definitely something to watch in the Far East.
So, and then an interesting bit of news came across that you sent an article, I sent an article. So we officially have a criminal case against Ilhan Omar, the the congresswoman from Minnesota, is now not only being investigated by the IRS, but she's also being investigated by ICE for potential fraud, and she's being investigated by student loans servicing because of her fraudulent taxes, possibly leading to her getting some student loan subsidization that she shouldn't have gotten.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's been hitting the newswire lately. And then on top of that, you have a contender for her seat, who's another refugee, but she's on the Republican side. She's, speaking to how, she came to this country as a refugee and has been able to take advantage of the American dream to make a life for herself here, and how she saw things that in Iraq that limited her freedom, that limited her ability to do things, and how Ilhan Omar is backing those same kind of policies here in the U.S. and how those policies have no, place here in the United States. Those are Sharia-esque laws that control the people. So you've got a contender there, Iraqi refugee Dalia Al-Qadi, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Dalia, but I've watched your video. It's a very moving ad space, and I definitely am rooting for you to take out Ilhan Omar in the election, not in any other fashion, but take her out of office and replace her with somebody who's grounded and really wants America to succeed, not someone who's against all of our best allies and who backs our enemies.
No, I definitely agree. And she has there's some strong Republican opponents. It'll be interesting to see if anybody's able to win in that seat. But, I definitely am happy to see that we're finally investigating what very well could be immigration fraud, which is definitively tax fraud, and what, could then, which I didn't even think about, didn't make the connection, could be student aid fraud.
Is it? So, correct me if I'm wrong here. Isn't the rumor is that she married her brother or something of that nature to get him a green card?
So that's part of the issue. So she married a man when she turned basically 18, 19 years old in the Islamic faith. They were never legally married. They had 3 kids together, and then spontaneously they get divorced. Out of nowhere, they get divorced. Then, very short time after, she marries this other guy, and he's a Britain national, but not an American national. He can't, he doesn't have an America visa. So, of course, now they're married. She sponsors him for immigration status, gets him over here. Then he gets his green card, and then shortly after that, boom, she divorces him and goes back to the original husband and marries him. Now, the problem with that is that she never legally married the first husband because they only married in the Islamic faith tradition. But to get the immigration status, she had to legally marry the second husband. Now, since the time that she has separated from and divorced the second husband to the time that she remarried in her faith tradition the first husband, she has continued to file her taxes as married filing jointly with the second husband, who is now, some people are asserting, actually her biological brother, whom she married because they have different last names, in order to get his immigration status and be able to get him here and get him a green card. So there's even some people asserting that her last name is not, in fact, Omar, that when her family was coming to the United States, that her family was chosen to go to Britain, and her last name is Elmi, who is the second husband's last name, and that her father decided to pass her off to another family and have them claim her as their child so that she could stay in the United States and not have to go to Great Britain. So, whether any of this is true is speculation, but there's enough smoke that I'm happy to see an investigation. If she's innocent, she's innocent. I'll say this about anybody. If you're innocent and you can, and an investigation finds no issue of wrongdoing, then fine. But, I'm happy that we're going to have an investigation to actually see if she has done anything. And if, in fact, it's found out that she is not biologically an Omar and is, in fact, an Elmi, then that calls into question her entire citizenship and whether or not she should be allowed to remain a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, that would make some very interesting times with the fact that she is a sitting congresswoman.
I would love to see her get arrested in the middle of a congressional hearing.
Especially if she's going on some kind of lefty rant that's just, filled with hateful diatribe.
She has been extremely outspoken about abolishing ICE, about getting rid of almost all immigration control, which is partly because she wants to be able to bring over more people from the Middle East, more far left Islamic people who believe in, Sharia law, which is, I personally think that's her intention, is to see Sharia be enacted here in the United States. She certainly has lived her life under Sharia. She wears the hijab. She's married in the faith tradition. She's not married legally. She's definitely lived her life in a Sharia fashion. And I think she wants to see Sharia be enacted here. And, I think for all those people who think she's an ally to the LGBTQ community, that, this is a sheep in wolf's clothing, or a wolf in sheep's clothing, sorry, that she will actually turn her back on the LGBT community as soon as she thinks she has the upper hand, because the Islamic Sharia tradition does not support LGBTQ people.
No, not even a little bit. That's if you get caught being gay or anything of that nature, you're stoned to death. I mean, adultery is stoned to death. So Sharia is very strict, very rigorous, very, very old fashioned.
Interesting thing, because it is now we have a divorce decree in which Ilhan Omar has been listed as the reason for the divorce, as the mistress. And she has recently separated again from her first and I guess third husband. So, did Ilhan Omar commit adultery? She has denied the claims, but there's a lot of smoke to that fire as well.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that one, but be interesting to see what happens, especially if she were to go back to her people. Where is she originally from? The pirate country, right? Somalia, yeah. That would be very interesting to see if she got deported back to Somalia. What would happen to her over there? I bet she'd be begging and pleading to come back to America in any form, fashion she could get here. Because
so one of her campaign advisors, who had spent a lot of time and traveled with her, his wife has now, in a divorce proceeding, alleged that Ilhan Omar is actually, the mistress to him, and and her husband has been cheating on her with Ilhan Omar. And she also has alleged that his company has illicitly profited from his relationship, his personal relationship with Ilhan Omar, that she has funneled additional campaign money to him and paid for his travel, not because of the necessity for him to be on the trip with her, but because she wants her boyfriend close.
Yeah, I mean, you see that a lot on the left, probably both parties, but you definitely see that a lot here recently with the left. Wasn't it Warren's son got paid like $750,000 to be a campaign staffer right out of high school or something of that nature? Just absolutely absurd amounts of money were funneled to a family member through the campaign. And then you have, Hunter Biden over in Ukraine and China. And then, the children here are profiting because their parents are, lifelong politician and have all these strings that they can pull, home and abroad, which is yet another one of my reasons that we need term limits. But that's another tangent we'll go off onto some other day.
It's also reported this week that essentially the Planned Parenthood is going to give a 10% kickback to the Democratic Party.
$45 million.
Yeah, so Planned Parenthood gets $500 million a year from the federal government for providing reproductive services, abortion, but now they're going to donate $45 million of that back to the DNC or to DNC candidates. So that is, a 9% kickback to the DNC for them funding Planned Parenthood. And I don't understand how this doesn't allude to illicit activity on the part of Democrat congresspeople who vote to pass money for this charity with very strong emphasis on, a fake quotation mark there. Planned Parenthood is a for-profit industry. They make a ton of money off of providing abortions. And let's before you think this is an anti-abortion tangent, it is. It 100% is an anti-abortion tangent. So I'm a strict pro-lifer, and I preach incrementalism. So because I preach incrementalism, I'm willing to make one small suffice or compromise when it comes to abortion, which is not making abortion illegal for life of the mother, incest, or rape. But 2% of all abortions total are for those reasons. 98% of abortions, of the 890,000 abortions that'll be performed this year, are elective abortions, meaning not medically necessary. So when you have an argument with a pro-choice person, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to throw the argument of, well, what about women who are raped? What about times of incest? What about women who die because of the pregnancy? All you have to say is, okay, I'll give you those if you'll give up all the others. They will immediately say no. No. It's got to be free for everybody. And now it's up to the time of birth, essentially. So there is no common ground here in this argument. Giving them only the 2%, if you give them that 2%, they're going to take the other 98. So this is the one issue where incrementalism is not going to work. It's an all or nothing issue, and this is because it was a judicial action that allowed Roe v. Wade, which allowed abortion to become legal. It's going to take another judicial action to get rid of it. It's going to take a reversal of Roe v. Wade. Now, what we've heard the left start saying is that, oh, well, it's law now because, how long it's precedent. Precedent is law. And there is some factual basis for that in our legal system, that precedent of a certain length of time does essentially become the law. But we have seen precedent set become overturned hundreds of years past, or at least 100 years past, when we saw the Civil Rights Act, Brown versus Board of Education, which overturned Topeka v. Kansas, which said that schools had to completely integrate, had to allow all students to enter regardless of race. So, there's several racially based cases here where when the left tells you, oh, precedent, well, if they want to go back to precedent, let's go back to these cases, because those were longer precedents than what Roe v. Wade is today. So for me, we're getting to the point where we need to take our shot on Roe v. Wade. And it needs to come, and it may be coming here soon, because Louisiana passed the law, the heartbeat law. And that may give us a shot at Roe v. Wade. But we're getting to the point, and it may need to happen if Trump gets reelected, when he gets reelected, that some state AGs, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, need to take their shot and need to see if they can get Roe v. Wade overturned.
Yeah, you saw Alabama do the same thing recently as well as Georgia. So there's definitely a lot of states that are gearing up for that battle. It'll be interesting to see what happens. You have the Women's March, which, you had a couple of very famous conservative women come out and say the Women's March has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with women as long as you're not a preborn female, a conservative female, support Trump, and a few other things. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how much the Women's March had nothing to do with women, but left-leaning women and abortion.
We're seeing the left do that more and more, right? You're not black unless you're a leftist black. Ayanna Pressley, the congresswoman, said, we don't need black people who aren't going to be voices for the black community. So what? Somebody else's voice, because they don't agree with you, they're not a voice for the black community? They don't know what it means to be a black? Or women who are conservative are not real women, or don't know what it's like to have a uterus? No, that's trans women who don't know what it's like to have a uterus. They don't know what it's like to be a real woman. They never will.
But you ready for something that's going to blow your mind?
Go ahead.
So today is Monday, Martin Luther King Day. Do you realize that Martin Luther King was a Second Amendment advocate, a First Amendment advocate, and a staunch conservative, but the liberal left has claimed him as their own and white or blackwashed his history and made him a liberal power figure, whereas in reality he was a very staunch Republican in a very Dixiecrat South, where he was fighting where he was having to fight tooth and nail for anything and everything, and got in prison 29 times in the South because he would dare stand up to the Democrat white people there.
So, I mean, it's important to note that we can't ascertain what his politics today would be should he be alive. We know that a lot of his family members are Republicans at this moment. We know that he was very socially conservative. He was not an advocate for LGBTQ. He thought that was a psychological issue. And if you really want to, if you want to do your research, Steven Crowder put out a very good video on that just today, going over leftist talking points versus actual MLK quotes. And yes, a lot of that dealing with identity politics. Identity politics, let's only consider people based on their race, their gender, their sexual orientation. Where Martin Luther King said, no, let's judge them on the content of their character. So I had this conversation, maybe not the best conversation to have with your boss, but we've had some conversations outside of work, and we had this conversation today, and I said, look, I support your right to be whatever you want to be. If you want to be gay, be gay. I'm not going to tell you can't be gay. But here's where the line stops, right? I get to then decide what I want to be. I get to then decide how I teach my kids. And this is why my kids don't go to public school, because I want to dictate to my kids. And some people call this indoctrination, but I call it teaching from my faith values. When I baptized my children, I promised to raise them with my Christian values. I swore in front of God that I would raise my children with the teachings of the church, within the teachings of the church. And I would do my best to maintain them within the teachings of the church. And I can't guarantee that sending them to public school today. And, I know your wife is a public school teacher, and there are great public school teachers. I'm not saying that every public school teacher is bad, but I'm saying there's enough to make me worry.
Yeah, and she's definitely frustrated. I'm not saying she's had to overcome a lot of hurdles because she never had that formal education training. She didn't go to school to be an educator. She went to school to be working in the oil field, and then decided to go get her education certificate after the fact. So, she's definitely has some frustrations too, because she's having to learn everything OJT or on the job training. She didn't have any of that stuff. She didn't learn that at the college level. So a lot of it's a shock to her. And, there's been a lot of frustrations for her. And especially being in a Title I school district, there are definitely a lot of challenges for her. Now, she's doing the best she can to overcome those challenges, and I think she's doing a great job. She's had consistently high test scores with kids that don't traditionally test well. So I believe she's doing a great job, and I commend her for doing what she's doing. But yeah, we personally are contemplating a move just because we don't want our kids going to this school district. It's there's better school districts around, and we're contemplating moving maybe to Washington County or something of that nature to be a little bit closer to her family, still close to my family, and have our kids grow up in a better environment. But just saw this come across the news line. Actually, it happened yesterday, but it's still relevant to today. The SecNav has announced that the newest aircraft carrier, which you bemoaned earlier episodes about, overspending, will be named after USS Doris Miller, after the first African American to receive the Navy Cross. He is famous for, during Pearl Harbor as a cook, grabbing a machine gun and firing back at the onslaught the Japanese were coming at. And then once finished doing that, carrying his fellow sailors off to the med tents to get aid. At the time, he was only allowed to be a cook or a few other titles. The black people back then weren't allowed to be certain things. Yeah, very segregated force. So the fact that he had the courage to stand up, take over a machine gun, fire back at the Japanese, and then help out his fellow white sailors who more than likely had belittled him for being black shows, amazing courage. So well-deserved honor for him. I think it's posthumously. I honestly believe it's posthumously because that was World War II. If he's still alive today, I apologize for the posthumously comment. But either way, well-deserved honor for him on Martin Luther King Day to have that named after him.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Do I think we need another aircraft carrier? No. But do I think he deserves to have an aircraft carrier named after him? I 100% and check my Twitter feed from this morning. I retweeted this. I saw this story come out. So yes, 100% agree with you that this man. He was only allowed to be a cook. He wasn't even. Technically, it was illegal for him to fire that weapon. Technically, so but what he did was risk his own life. He could have run to the belly of the ship. He could have jumped off and swam to shore. He could have done any of those things. But instead, he runs out, loads an anti-aircraft gun, which did he know how to load it? Did he figure it out on the fly? I don't care. But he figures it out. He starts firing at Japanese airplanes as they're coming into Pearl Harbor. Listen, this is a valiant man. And regardless of his skin color, regardless of whatever he believed in his life for the rest of his life, I will give that man hero status because of that one action. I don't care if he voted for every Dem from then on. That man is an American hero, and he 100% deserves this honor. And I'm happy that our Navy, under this president, mind you, this white supremacist president with this white supremacist administration, has named not only so. Typically, aircraft carriers are named after former U.S. presidents. Not named after Ronald Reagan, Abraham Lincoln. There's so many aircraft carriers that are named after former presidents. This is the first one named after an enlisted Navy sailor, and what a great choice the Navy made for the first one to do. I applaud SecNav for that decision. And you know what? That's a decision that doesn't come without presidential approval. So I just want everybody to know that President Trump had to sign off on this. So this white supremacist organization that we have in the administration we have sure does do things that favor the African American community.
Yeah, because President would say that this would be named the George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier. The fact that he was a Navy pilot in World War II, former president, recently deceased, the easy way to go would be the George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier. But for them to go and name this after him, just a true honor. Definitely recognizing the path that he took to helping out the black community, help desegregate the military, be a true hero. It's very cool to see that happen. Something I never thought would happen and is now happening in my lifetime. So, how we saw earlier about, never say never about things in your lifetime, kind of kicking back at that. But if you want to, now that you've touched on the whole white supremacy thing, do you want to talk Virginia for a little bit, or do you want to cut that off for next week since we are already? I think it is past midnight and it is 2:40 or 2 hours 45 minutes so far.
So I mean, we can hit Virginia. We don't need to talk about it for very long, but a few highlights. So for those of you who don't know, the state of Virginia is now completely Democrat owned. It is a Democrat House, it's a Democrat Senate, and it's a Democrat governor. And they are coming hard after Second Amendment rights. They are coming hard after anything that Republicans hold dear, that conservatives hold dear. So don't get it wrong. If you live in Virginia, now 22 counties in Virginia have declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuary counties. And the sheriffs of these counties said, we will not enforce these new laws. You can't make us do it. We won't do it. It won't happen. You'll force us out of office before this happens. So, I think that's a very important note right there. The next note in regards to this is today, the Democrats were having a big hearing on gun control. So basically, they want to outlaw all, not AR-15s, not weapons of war. Now, weapons of war includes pistols, it includes pump shotguns, it includes semi-automatic shotguns, it includes bolt-action rifles. So they're literally, a weapon of war, we could go forever on weapons of war. If you really want to get after it, a shovel can be considered a weapon of war. So where does this end?
The sharpest stick.
Yeah, that term, weapon of war, is unambiguous for a reason, people. They are making it unambiguous so that they can change the definition later on. What they're doing right now is they're trying to alliterate that it's an AR-15. But that's not all they mean, because snipers use bolt-action rifles. Engineers use pump shotguns. Infantry uses semi-automatic shotguns and semi-automatic rifles. Officers carry pistols. So what in there is not a weapon of war? What do they want? A bow and arrow? And I'm sure even that will one day become look at Britain, which is now trying to outlaw knives because, they got rid of guns and knife attacks went through the roof. So now they're trying to get rid of knives. And, the best way to say this is that evil people are evil. And evil people will find ways to do bad regardless. But what we saw today in Virginia, which the left-wing media had propagated that this was going to be another Charlottesville, this was going to be another Unite the Right, that we were going to see deaths, that we were going to see riots, that we were going to see chaos, that shootings would occur. I've seen the number be anywhere between 22,000 and 35,000. Of course, it's a crowd. It's an estimate. We don't have an exact number. But what we do know is not one arrest, not one fight, not one riot, not one shooting. No gun came to life and magically shot somebody. Everybody that came there, left there. It was a peaceful event in which Second Amendment supporting Americans came out and voiced their opinion loudly and strongly, but without violence. Contrast to any left-wing protest we've had over the last few years. Every single one has had arrests. Every single one has had act of violence. Whereas this one, which was a far larger protest than any of those left-wing protests, no violence whatsoever. No arrests. Nothing. Poor CNN, they're not going to have any news to report tonight.
They had the fake news to report. You have, what was it? NSNBC, whatever, one of the NBC channels, played an audio clip and then said, the protesters saying we will not comply. But in reality, if you listen to the audio clip, it's, them reporting the American, the Pledge of Allegiance and, nothing of that nature. So kind of a big, wait, did you expect us to read your headline and not actually watch the video? Because the video is very evident that is not what they're saying. So kind of, crazy that even got close to being, approved. And then the fact that it's actually on a mainstream media, just very, very, very mind blowing that happened. But what was kind of funny, and so you and I both follow and are followed by, now you finally got to follow back, by Jessica Fletcher over at Daily Wire. And she tweeted out something about an hour ago. It's a story in 4 parts. You had David Hogg, who everyone remembers from the shooting down in Florida. He's been very pro gun control ever since that event. Very backed by the left ever since that time. He goes, he posted a tweet saying, "How many of these people do you think would support the Black Panthers' right to carry or armed resistance to the white militias that stole the North American continent? Answer, none, because they only want guns to enforce white supremacy." And the very next tweet, someone goes, "Dude, you know the Black Panthers were there today with support, right?" And then he goes, "Prove it." And then they post a picture of the Black Panthers holding up their fist, at the rally, Here's supporting the Second Amendment. So, and that was by Jack you can't help me out here. Jack Pasabic. Yeah.
OAN.
Yeah.
Very good follow on Twitter.
Yeah, and he's a very good follow on Twitter. Both he and Jessica Fletcher are both very good follows on Twitter. I think they actually kind of like to jab back. Yeah, and they like to they kind of like poke fun at each other back and forth too. So it's kind of fun to watch. But yeah, that was pretty funny. The left coming out and going, "Oh, this is only about white nationalism. This is only about Nazism. This is only about neocons." Da 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 da. But then you have the Black Panthers there. You had Antifa even claiming that they were going to show up in support of the Second Amendment. So if Antifa is backing a Republican or a right side conservative effort, then the left must be doing something wrong. That Antifa is turning coat on them and backing the other side. So very big news day in that fashion, that this was a very peaceful event. This was a very, loud event, but very peaceful, no fights, no stabbings, no guns going off. And there were a ton of guns there. And this is on the heels of the governor declaring this a potential emergency and trying to get guns banned from the site the day before, because he knew that if people were able to show up with guns and not have anything happen, that it was just going to hurt his dialogue, that he was, his position was going to be weakened because of this type of event. And then you have people going, "Well, why was this on MLK Day?" And you go, "Well, because these protesters actually have jobs, and today was a holiday, so they could actually show up and not lose their jobs by doing so."
So, I did want to fact check you. I did pull up the names of current aircraft carriers, and you said, your suggestion for the next aircraft carrier to be named after a president was?
H.W. Bush.
Commissioned in January 10th of 2009, the USS George H.W. Bush is a Nimitz-class carrier that's been in service now for 11 years and 11 days.
Okay, well, see, I was going with aircraft carriers, and the last one being named Reagan. So glad that you fact-checked me and proved me wrong, because that's probably... there's actually been two carriers commissioned since the Reagan, which is the Bush and the Gerald R. Ford. The next carrier to be commissioned will be the John Kennedy, and then they're going back a ways and naming the next one the Enterprise. So the Enterprise had been a ship that had sailed for 55 years, 70 days, and was decommissioned on your birthday, February 3rd of 2017. And so they are because that ship served for such a long time, now they are going to rename, as they did with the Lincoln, rename the new one, set to be commissioned in 2027, which has already started construction. It'll be named the Enterprise. Then the one stated, so the Doris Miller is stated date of 2030 to be commissioned. And then there's another one that was ordered as well by the government here for 2034. So that'll push our total number of carriers to, we have 11 currently sailing. We have 2 that are in construction, 1 that's already completed, just waiting to be finished testing. And we have 1 stated to commission in 2027. Those are already in construction, and then 2 more. So that'll take our total number to 15 aircraft carriers. Now the Enterprise, is that one going to be able to go where no man has gone before?
We'll have to see. Space Force is there, buddy.
But that's part of the Air Force, not the Navy.
Yeah. Now the Nimitz is likely to be decommissioned, at any times, as well as the Dwight D. Eisenhower. Both of those are over 40 years old. It's likely that either one of those could be decommissioned at any time once these new two are commissioned. So we could see a flop. We could see one come in and one go out, which, okay, understandable. But still, there's 23 aircraft carriers in the world. We own 11 of them. So I'll still argue that we could spend our money more wisely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're right. It's one of those things where, the best offense or the best offense is a good defense. And, us having all that power, keeps other nations at bay because they know if they mess with us, it's going to be hell to pay because we have plenty of ammunition. We have plenty of rifles. We have plenty of power to come back at them 10 times harder than they could ever touch us. So, that is always a deterrent. You don't necessarily have the forces as a offense. You have them as a deterrent. So that's one argument. The other argument is, yes, we're spending way too much money. But if we are replacing older, equipment that is at end of life with these newer equipment, then that makes sense. Now, if we're just adding on and making more, that's a whole different story. Do we take one of these ones that we're about to retire and sell it to Russia because it was just burnt up? I don't know. That would be a potential. It's still 40 years older than anything in our fleet, or it's 40 years older than our newest ship, but it's still a weapon of war that a potential opponent has that they don't need per se. So, I mean, it's an interesting idea to see if we would sell something like that. More than likely, what's going to happen, though, is that we're going to find somewhere to dry dock it or, put it up on display, kind of like the USS Lexington, the USS Texas, and all these other, ships of war in the past, and just put them on display as a floating museum and let them be kind of a tourist attraction.
So, I mean, I think, especially for a lot of them, they will be tourist attractions like the Lexington, like the USS Texas, like a lot of other ones. But, that remains to be seen what will actually happen. Some of them might become target practice, for our pilots to go shoot at. So, there's a lot of different things that could and couldn't happen with them. But, the question is, how much money do you really want to spend here? As a government, we're already on strained financial resources. But, we'll talk about that for an hour if I really get going on that topic. So,
and let's not, since it's 3 hours.
Yeah, we're coming up on the 3 hour mark. There's a few things we didn't get to this week, but nothing that I feel is that important. What about you?
I mean, there was a couple little blips here and there. You had the Facebook rules now considering transgenderism a protected class on their platform, but that's probably a 30-minute conversation with your long-winded ass, so don't necessarily want to bring that one up too much. Other than that, you've just got, impeachment news, you've got, China news, you've got other stuff, but this is our longest show to date, so I'm thinking we're at a good wrap-up time. How did I do? And I'll point out one thing real fast. How did I do this episode with answering everything with yeah? Since you wanted to point that out mid-episode, last episode, that I was starting every sentence with yeah. Did I do better this episode?
Did it help you remember it?
A little bit. I mean, I wish you would have pointed it out right before we started, but that may have gotten in my head. I didn't consciously try it
once I notice it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't consciously try, but I was definitely subconsciously. I know I did it a couple times, but I don't think I did it nearly as much this episode as I have in the past.
You were definitively better. And everybody has catchwords. I'll say myself, I used to be a trainer in the Army. I used to train pre-deployment school, and my co-trainer, who was a really good friend of mine, he sat in the back of my classroom, and he counted me in an hour say the word okay over 80 times. So I was saying the word okay more than once a minute, because I, at the time, tended to end my sentences with okay as a way of reinforcing what I had just said. So I would say a sentence, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Like, you got it. You're following. You're tracking. But the problem
that's kind of an Army thing, because, that's, we always say HUA to make sure that people heard, understood, acknowledged, because that's what HUA stands for. So definitely something the Army kind of... The Army kind of fucks you up with that, because that's something that your drill sergeants will do, and you kind of catch on to it, and then you start doing it yourself because, oh, well, he's a drill sergeant. He must, if that's a correct way of doing things, because he did it, so I'll do it too. I'll mimic what he's doing.
So I will say the rumor I've heard from an old Special Forces member is the original HUA did not stand for that whatsoever. It stood for head up ass.
I'm sure that's more likely the real answer, but how everything's politically correct nowadays, heard, understood, acknowledged, it makes sense though. Well, the story goes that the Rangers invented HUA for somebody who had their head up their ass. Somebody who had their head up their ass, somebody who was ate up was HUA. And then all of a sudden one day, because, the Rangers and Special Forces at that time were the only ones who wore berets. And airborne were the only ones who wore berets. So this Lieutenant Colonel, Fulberg Colonel, comes walking by, and he's wearing his uniform, but he's ate up. And so one of the Rangers looks over and says, "Oh, man, that guy is HUA." And the Colonel turns around and goes, "Oh, what does that mean?" And that's when that means you're like, you're super high speed. You're doing great. And the Colonel ran with it. And then he went and started telling all his soldiers that. And then it caught on. That sounds like a story straight off PNN or Private News Network. But I it's probably got some validity to it. That sounds like something that could actually have happened.
Oh, that story has been relayed to me by a very trusted individual of mine who spent many, many, many years in the Special Forces and supposedly is able to track the rumor back to its source. Now, whether I can personally validate that or not, but this man has never given me a reason to not believe him. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. One quick note, because it's just hit the headlines. Jalen Hurts is going to wear a helmet to honor his time at both Alabama and Oklahoma at this year's Senior Bowl. So he'll have a two-sided helmet. He'll have a Bama/OU helmet.
I think that's kind of neat. Yeah, I think that's. I don't mind it.
Been even more interesting if he had won a Heisman at either one of those. But I mean, he was definitely that kind of talent at both schools, but never really got that recognition per se.
Well, and I mean, was he a Heisman? In none of the years
he
that
was
he
a contender.
Played, was he a Heisman level quarterback? No, but he was definitely a contender every year. His NFL career is going to be interesting because he's had so much success at the college level, but not for the traditional quarterback that you want. He's not a pocket quarterback. He can run, but he's not. Is he that good of a thrower? But, is he the next Lamar Jackson? And it's hard to say he's not because he's won a lot. He's never lost a lot of games wherever he's been.
No, and he's more of your traditional game managing quarterback in the fact that he doesn't lose the game for you, but he does have that ability to go out and win too. And he definitely proved that this year at Oklahoma. I definitely think the year with, Riley. No, yes, Riley.
Lincoln Riley. Yes.
Lincoln Riley. Yes, got a name right. Woohoo! Lincoln Riley definitely helped his stock. At Alabama, he had kind of hit a ceiling, and Tua had taken over. So, he really wasn't getting any playing time. So he did what was best for his career. He went to Oklahoma for a year. Lincoln Riley was able to work magic with him and put him in that high power, high octane offense. And you saw the results this year. He was a Heisman contender this year. He wasn't front runner after about the fifth week or so, but he was up there listed with the top people for several weeks, and then kind of fell off once Oklahoma started playing a little bit more competitive teams, not real competition, but competitive teams. So that's definitely something that will help his draft stock. I don't know if he'll be drafted in the first round or not, but he's definitely going to get drafted, and he'll make a good career quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. The combine's going to be big for him. Can he come out? Can he show that he can throw? Can he? If he has a great pro day and he has a consistent, he runs a good 40, it's going to help his draft stock. I see him as a late second round, early third, mid third quarterback. A team's going to bring him in. It's going to give him 2-3 years. Is he, New England? Is he San Diego? Those are teams that I would look at. Teams that have an established starter, but is at the end of their career and is looking for a guy who needs 2-3 years on the bench to learn, to get some of the finer tweaks of reading an offense, and then could come in and has the athleticism. Jalen Hurts has every bit of the athleticism to play the position. But can he read the defense well enough? Can he make, can he diagnose the plays? That'll be the interesting part. I don't think he's a first-year starter like Lamar was, but who knows? He might get in the NFL, and nobody thought Lamar was a first-year starter. Everybody thought this exact same story about Lamar Jackson. And what did Lamar Jackson do? Probably win the MVP in his second year and have a damn good first year. So, what the hell do we know?
Yeah, we've proven time and time again, a little bit, but not a lot. Somewhat breaking news. It happened near the beginning of our show. But a quick update on the running back commitment from Kilgore JUCO, Crownover. He has been offered a blue shirt. So he won't officially enroll until August, and he'll count against the 2021 class. So A&M is still playing with 2 spots for this year. So potentially taking the kid out of Surprise, Arizona as a running back, and then there's a defensive tackle out of Mississippi, last name of Jackson, that A&M is looking at pretty heavily. So those are the two recruits that A&M is still looking at pretty heavily, as well as Zach Evans, who we touched on earlier. Now that one's doesn't look like it's going to be determined until at the earliest May, when Summer 1 starts, and he can enroll then, and then again, or into May, early June, and then again in July when Summer 2 starts, and then yet again in August when actual school starts there in August. And then if he was to wait that long, he could potentially be a blue shirt as well and count towards 2021. So any school that takes him has that opportunity to do that as well and count him against the next year's class instead of this year's class.
All right. So with that, we're over 3 hours. I'm calling it. It's time to go to bed. Thank you all for listening so much. If you made it to this point, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sticking with us for this long. And, again, Kyle and I, we do everything we do to try to make better content for you. We hope that you enjoy what you're listening to. Our listeners seem fairly consistent. We're getting about the same 45, 50 people a week. So if you enjoy the show, give us a thumbs up, send us a comment, hit us on Twitter, find us, let us know what you like about it, let us know what we can improve, let us know what we can do better. There's always room for improvement. Kyle, where can they find you?
So at Twitter, I am Outlaw FDT08. That's Outlaw Fish Drill Team 08. And then, that's where I prefer to be reached. I'm also on Facebook, but it's actually the same handle there too, Outlaw FDT08, facebook.com/FDT08. But Twitter is where I'm more likely to respond to you. I'm very picky on who I actually friend on Facebook. So you can follow me on Facebook, but I'm, if you friend me out of the blue, I'm going to probably say, not today, ISIS, and decline your invite. But on Twitter, anyone's more than welcome to follow me. Gladly take your conversation. And if you have valid input for us on this show, I would gladly like to hear it. Gladly take it up with Ross. If you want to be a guest on the show, help my numbers out. Keep me ahead of Ross on the guest slots. Right now I'm leading 1-0 with about to go 2-0 tomorrow or the next day once we finally do interview our second guest. Had a little bit of a scheduling conflict there, but I'd love to stay ahead of Ross in that count. Right now 1-0, about to be 2-0.
Let's not forget that quality does beat quantity, right? I'm going for big fish.
Hey, I'm bringing quality people to the table, so I don't want to hear that.
They're definitely quality, but I'm going for some big fish. You're going for
the top rope. I'm going off the middle rope.
Interesting people that make great conversation. I don't lie, but still not the big fish.
I mean, I'm reaching out to those too. I just haven't yet broke through neither of you. You've had one person say they're going to, and I hope they do. I really do. That would be a great conversation. I follow the person on Twitter just like you do. They're an amazing follow. We've talked about them in the past. If you want to hear, want to go back a couple episodes, you can find that out. Unless Ross wants to just go ahead and spill the beans again.
No, so we're actively not trying to talk about him because we don't want him. We don't want to scare him away. We don't want him to feel pressure. We don't want him to think that we're, some weirdos that are trying to attack him. We'll reach out to him in the future. He had some valid reasons he couldn't be on the show, and we'll reach out to him in the future. Hopefully, he was interested in being on the show before. Hopefully, he'll come on the show later. Nothing about why he didn't come on the show had anything to do with Kyle or I or the show or the format or anything. Just all about logistics. So we're definitely hoping to get him on the show in the future. But we will make those announcements if and when they become actual announcements to make.
Exactly. And then you can always follow our umbrella company, which is Zero Gravity Media, Luke and Russ over at Hardly Strictly Politics. And one of the reasons we're moving to Monday night is because they do record Friday night, Saturday night, and then release Saturday, Sunday, depending on schedule. So kind of help cushion that a little bit, give our listeners a little bit more time to listen to us, and not giving them more content, but spacing out the content so that they're not not flooded all at one time and then nothing for the rest of the week. So. You can follow them at Hardly Strictly Politics. The website is Zero Gravity Media or Zero Gravity Med. And then their website is zero-gravity-media.com. We're on there as well. You can find both of our handles on that website. Please feel free to reach out to us or them about any content you want covered, and we'll gladly get to it as time permits.
So as for me, guys, it's at Ross Schumann, at ROSSSCHUMANN on Twitter. I'm sorry if my voice sounds a little weird this week. I am currently fighting a cold and am, fairly stuffed up in the nose, so I'm sure my voice sounds a little bit different than normal. But trying to power through. Had to turn off my mic several times to go into a coughing fit during this recording, but, wanted to get this content out for you guys, wanted to get you your weekly update. So please do follow us on Twitter. Please do let us know what we can do better for you to make your life a little bit better as you're listening to us. And hey, like and share us, man. Put us out there in the Twitterverse. Let your friends know who we are. Let them know what we're about. Let them know why they should listen to us. And let's keep growing. Let's keep getting better. And let's keep looking forward to a better and bigger 2020.
That's exactly correct. And remember, guys, gig 'em and God bless. Y'all have a great night.
Everybody have a great night. God bless you all. God bless America.